Going. Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Belton here. Today I'm going to have a rather long video for you guys, but we're going to be discussing a couple sort of keystone topics that hopefully will be of interest for you guys. The first of which will be my thoughts on the new league announcement and upcoming patch 0.5 for Path of Exile 2 that was released yesterday. Um, Now, those of you who watched it, which I assume most of you have, I'm sure are as excited as I am. But you'll also probably make note of the fact that that video, just the announcement where they just teased each kind of new sort of feature for, between a minute and 5 minutes each, that video is actually an hour and a half long. And so to go through it individually and, you know, just comment on point by point, all the things that they discussed, especially given my capacity for brevity, would probably end up being like a 12-hour long video. And since we don't actually have patch notes, a good portion of that would be speculative to begin with. And so, as a remedy to that, I am just going to. I watched the video yesterday in its entirety at the live announcement, got a good sleep in. And so, what I'm going to do with the first part is just take my fresh thoughts or memories of that, and while I am running temples in game, just so there's something for you guys to watch. You can watch my current build. You know, keep it semi interesting, so it's not just me talking at the camera for so long. While doing that, I'm going to discuss what stuck out in my mind from those, the stuff that kind of impacted me the most, what I think about it, um, the stuff that I thought was the most powerful thing, potential repercussions of that, the downstream consequences, both positive and negative, what I'm looking forward to the most, etc. Basically, just a review. Excuse me. Damn. What an intro. Of those of that announcement, and then the second part, and this is all going to be part of the same video here. We're then going to transition that into how I plan to start the next league, because this is something I get asked like persistently every single league. At the end of every league for the past 13 years, people always ask me about how I plan to start the next league or how I start the league. It's I don't know if it's like a recency bias thing, but I do stream every league start, and I do make videos every league start. So, nothing really thematically has changed over those 13 years. I've had the same approaches in that whole time. In fact, actually, if you go look up PO Economics, Belton, you will see that there is a 10-year-old guide written by me, Belton's Market Manifesto, on on basically the thematic overview approaches that I take to these league starts, including price point equilibriums, predictable patterns in consumer behavior, calculable risk and the law of averages, etc., etc. These again will be consistent thematic motifs in what we will discuss, but I will give some more specific things where appropriate, tied into the first part of the video, which is the upcoming league and what they've announced so far. But again, keeping in mind that of course without patch notes, there's only three possibilities if somebody tells you definitively what it is that they're doing or what is going to happen. Either they're a charlatan, they're an idiot, or they assume you are. So do be cautious, if you're engaging with various content of people that are speaking in absolutes. Of course, it's a part of the content sphere. It's sort of an Ouroboros of creates like a positive or negative feedback loop, I suppose, on your stance on it. But people are obviously encouraged to comment and to dramatize and to sensationalize things in the moment, and as a result of them being sensational, more people watch and yada yada yada. The net result of which is that it's very easy to be disinformed, poorly informed, but sort of paradoxically also feeling informed. I'm going to try to avoid that the best I can and keep things as grounded and rooted in reality as they can be. I'll try to make mention of when I think things are opinion based or speculative, and where appropriate, I will provide like the data or the math or something that is just objective and quantifiable. I'll make that appropriately available as well as I comment on things here. But do keep in mind, until we get like actual patch notes, a lot of this will just sort of be qualitative or speculative. Obviously, drawing from my my history and experience with PoE one, some of these things are offshoots of pre-existing mechanics or whatever. So there is some basis in which to inform future expectations. But again, do keep in mind Things are subject to change. As they said, they released this announcement a little bit earlier than they normally do because they have to do some more testing on their end. So even from what was announced yesterday, it is possible that some of those things might change somewhat. And again, until those patch notes are definitively out, there is no way to speak in absolutes. So in terms of the value add here, with respect to what I discuss in terms of first impressions and transitioning that into how do I approach the next league, we'll try to keep it sort of more of a metacognitive approach, or a 30,000-foot view about how to successfully start league starts in both like a sort of behavioral kind of way, but also some specific techniques that I use. But do keep in mind when I get into the specifics of it, um, that that's just a historical retelling, subject to change. Don't take any of these as past results are not indicators of future success necessarily. Although if you focus more on the approaches, which is what I'll try to focus on, like the underlying reasoning or the causality for the decision making, that's where the value should lie. So that's going to be like the second keystone of what we'll discuss throughout this. And then the third part of the video will be how I am planning on finishing the rest of this league, 0.4. What I've been doing, for the past like week or so, and then, what I'll be doing for the next 3 weeks until the next league comes along. And then tying that back into how my league finishes, the ends of league, inform how I start leagues. And I think this is one of the big gaps of experientially and in terms of just an overall knowledge base or knowledge asymmetry that I have as a competitive advantage over almost any other, certainly content creators. As obviously when the player numbers drop, most people stop streaming and making YouTube videos because, it's just not, the value proposition isn't really there. I play every league from the beginning to the last day, and I have done so always. And that's not like a ratioing thing. It's just that understanding in collecting data points on and just conditioning yourself to understand sort of thematically what it is in terms of like the market or the there's a pervasive sort of thinking in PoE that item strength, right, as it pertains to character power, like performative output, is always a one-to-one direct correlation with its value or its price on the market, rather than looking at items as like various sort of thematic or asset classes, or like archetypal fulfillments, right? So certain things like perfect corruptions are things that have a much higher appreciation curve in the long run than things like perfectly crafted like mirror items or 61 rares do, despite the fact that like that corrupted implicit or corrupted enchant in PoE 2 might have like a 0.1% performance uptick, whereas that perfect rare item might have a 20% performance uptick, yet the 0.1% corrupted enchant might 10x the value of that item, whereas that rare item might actually hit its peak relative value around week 2 or week 3, and then actually, not only in sales volume or market demand, but also in its relative value, either flatline or trail off towards the end of the league. These terms are perhaps a bit abstract as a preface here. Hopefully I'm not losing too many of you, but it's important to be able to understand and distinguish those things if you want to have consistent long-term success, because once you are like cognizant and you can recognize again those sort of archetypal or thematic items that have the long-term value prospectus, it makes it significantly easier to inform your early league decision making, because what you have has a long-term value as a hedge against its short-term liquidity. And what that means is that let's say that like you can get something for like 1 div and you think you could sell it for 2 divs in the immediate, right? Like within like a 1 hour to like, let's say 3-day window, right? Now, if that doesn't sell, right? If you can hedge the fact that that might not sell in that exact window with the fact that that item will only gain in demand and gain in relative value as the league goes on, and to the point that like let's say on day 50, right? So you got it on day 2 and you're hoping to sell it on day 5, right? If you know that on day 50 that item will probably be worth like 30 or 300 divines, right? You don't have like that anxiety or like that necessity to sell it at a loss, or to avoid, to act with risk aversion on an item, because its long-term value prospectus is greater in an absolute sense than what its short-term one is. Now, obviously, the compounding rates of return, you typically want to move things in a relatively short window, just so you can, exponentially scale, uh, or compound your economic gains. And obviously, it's always nice to be able to have a defined window on any kind of financial investment. But again, that is always going to be like an explicit intent. However, it's good to know that you've got that as a backup plan. And again, I know this is fairly abstract, but that will significantly impact how it is that we approach the beginning of leagues. Because the league start section, once we get to there, the way that I approach the beginning of leagues is dramatically different than almost anyone that I'm aware of, streaming wise, content wise. And so, if this is a novel kind of video thematically for you to be watching, you're not probably going to hear the same advice from basically anyone else. And that doesn't put me in a special camp or to say I'm smarter or better than anyone or anything like that. It's just, it is a strategic approach that has, I think my track record speaks for itself in that respect, but I think it's perhaps why there is, why every league people ask me, despite the fact I've done the same thing for 45 leagues, what are you planning on doing? What are you planning on doing? Because it's just not something that is like in popular consciousness, or to use a more PoE term, it's not, it's not meta to league start the way that I typically do. But I will certainly explain why it is I approach those, why it is I approach things that way. And again, the end of league stuff right here, I know most of you probably don't care about the ends of leagues. Maybe you're not actively playing. If I ever reference standard, maybe you say, who gives a fuck about standard? Nobody plays standard. But again, even if you don't care about future events will impact the present, because, the people, think of it as like a PoE version of the marshmallow test, right? Which is like the greatest indicator of future success that they've been able to do on like an early learning with children, is they have a scientist enter a room with a kid and give him a marshmallow, right? Put a marshmallow in front of him, and they tell that kid, all right, I got to leave the room for 5 minutes. They know the kid wants to eat the marshmallow, but before they leave the room, they say to the kid, if you wait 5 minutes to eat that marshmallow, you'll have 2 marshmallows instead, right? Knowing the kid wants it. But because they exit the room, the kid knows that they have free will in this moment. They can just eat it. They won't get in trouble. But if they wait, they know they'll get double of what the thing they want is, right? And some kids decide the second the guy walks out, they'll eat it immediately. And some kids will sit there patiently, wait, and he'll come back in the room and he'll give them 2, right? And that test in of itself, the ones who were able to wait, to defer their short-term reward, that test has proven to be the greatest indicator of future success in life of any kind of testing that they've done on children. And if you were to co-opt that sort of analogously into a line of thinking and apply it to PoE2, that would probably be the most real-world appropriate example of how it is from a thematic standpoint that I'll approach early league. And the experience I have in late leagues greatly impacts that approach in terms of both confidence and understanding. And I'll try to tie these all into like an interweaving narrative where it's easy enough to follow. And I'll put timestamps below, but as a reminder too, because I know that this video is going to be long, and I know that 10 to 20% of the comments are probably going to be people just typing yap, 3-hour long video, fuck, whatever. Okay. YouTube videos have an AI section below them. I think that's automatically cooked in through YouTube now. If there's something that I just mentioned there in terms of what I'll be talking about in this upcoming video that you're specifically interested in, and you don't care about any of the other things, if you go to that little AI guy and you like tell him to summarize the video, you can then just ask it, be like, when does Belton talk about league start, whatever, and it'll give you a timestamp specifically, or you can ask it questions where it'll summarize and tie things together. Uh, that AI thing tool hopefully will make these longer videos that I do more digestible, because they'll be able to distill things together. I would avoid asking specific questions about PoE things though, because AI doesn't understand like crafting nuance, for example. So like asking for like a step by step on how to make a certain item or how certain like actual mechanical functions work is not a good idea for that. But in terms of just getting again sort of an overview, you can do so there. And then for those of you who like the longer form stuff, hopefully you guys enjoy this. And I realize that this whole preface is probably longer than most people's entire videos. Well, that is what it is. I'm sure this video probably won't do that well from an analytics standpoint, but for those of you that take the time to watch it in its entirety, hopefully it finds that value for you. Now, before I jump in the map and get started here, I just wanted to say that we are at about 49,600 subscribers. A very long-term goal for me on YouTube has been to get to that 50,000 mark. Just because it's a nice round number and you know it's a cool benchmark, but also it's halfway into getting a play button. I've been working on the YouTube for 10 years now. 400 videos, covering over 45 leagues. Every single video focusing on the areas of interest and expertise that I have. And so I know that if you choose to subscribe, if you're new to the channel and you're interested in PoE 2, I can guarantee that my effort, consistency, and I think value add will be there. And I hope that you do take that consideration into it and help me reach that goal. So if you could take a second, if you haven't subscribed and do so, I'd really appreciate that. But if not, hopefully we can earn that sub maybe by the end of the video, or if not, in future ones. All right, I've now fulfilled my content creator duty to prompt for a subscription, so we can get started. The first thing we'll be doing here, I just need to get some crystals to be able to do the temples, and then we'll start banging the temples out back to back to back to back. And I think I've got like 25-ish crystals already, so we won't need to do these infinitely. But anyways, let's get some volume on here for myself. I am streaming this live on Twitch, and I asked my chat to help me out with the volume balance and some other things. As you can tell, I've got a green screen now, so hopefully that the production standpoint of these videos will improve a little bit, or is a little bit more palatable. Let's just see here. One thing I was conscious of was the I know, especially in Temple, that I click quite loudly and frequently. My right click is on Spark, my space bar is Blink, and I effectively spam the two things. And because I am the final boss of Neckbeards, naturally I have a crusty computer, which is quite loud, I've been told. So hopefully you guys won't be able to hear, or at least in a if you can hear it, it's not as abrasive or interrupting as it has been in the past to hear all of the clicking and keyboard sounds. And if it's not, I apologize. Did my best here. But yeah, looks like everything's good on that end. So we'll get started now. That was like a 20-minute intro, but is what it is. All right, here we go. So the league announcement. What did I think yesterday? Well, first of all, I've been kind of tickling with the thought that I should have named, or this forthcoming YouTube video that I'm now recording, that I should jokingly refer to it as PoE 3 review, because holy cow, talk about a content patch. Of the 45-ish leagues that I've played Path of Exile dating back to March of 2013, that is by far the longest announcement that I've ever seen. Now, not that duration always translates to value, or that it's necessarily going to be good, but wow, that was action-packed throughout. It's Every time they mentioned a new crafting mechanic, my heart started fluttering a little bit, and so there were so many of them actually that at first I was kind of marking them down and making little mental notes of what I should talk about, what I thought was good or whatever. And by like the fifth one that they mentioned, because they were such like sort of brief abstracts of what's forthcoming with them, I kind of I don't want to say threw in the towel, but I was like, you know what, I don't think I can specifically comment on any one of them. One of the things that really stuck out to me as I was watching it, though, aside from the fact that they're reworking things that either were underserved from a player experiential standpoint, was there was this one word that I kept hear them saying that kept sticking out for me because it's one of the things that I really, 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 really value in myself, and like I think is almost of like the pinnacle amount of importance with respect to predicting long-term success of any PoE player, and that is goal orientation, like specific and intentional, purpose-driven goal orientation, right? Often I would even say mocked in like YouTube comments, either on videos or on posts. When we're halfway through a league and a new PoE one league launches, and everyone switches over to play that, and I still keep playing PoE two. It doesn't matter really what I put out. There'll be a portion of comments that say like "LOL, game's dead. Who cares? PoE two, yada 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 yada. How are you still playing? Don't you get bored?" Things along these lines. I'm sure some of you watching this right now probably have made those comments yourself. I understand why you do. I don't fault you for it. Um, but the reason why I'm able to do that though is because I set like specific short-term goals, on a day-to-day basis. It's like at certain points in my life I've been like as high as 300 pounds, as low as 180, right? And it's like when I get to that state where I'm like grossly fat and like the goal that's immediately ahead of me from a larger standpoint is to get back into shape, right? That's not really like exact, or in a way it's one of those like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be rich, I'm going to be happy, right? But there's nothing actionable about that, right? It's too non-specific to really actually do put into action, right? And I feel like a lot of people when they approach PoE, they have these sort of similar um, platitudes or generalizations with respect to what it is that they want to achieve without any direct specificity. And I think that that is a very big contributing factor to why people don't actually obtain those abstract goals. And tying this back to the league announcement, I saw them consistently mention, uh, quests, for example, or goals, right? Like where, when they pop out the atlas, you're going to be able to go northwest, east, south, and you'll have a direct quest chain where, like, you have a discernible start and a discernible end. And each one of them has, like, a perceptible positive outcome for achieving that goal. Now, while obviously those are not necessarily infinite in terms of the quests or whatever, and eventually, you'll be able to get all of those new Atlas passives or whatever. That's another thing I thought was really cool, but I'll touch on that later. I think just building the habit of orienting people towards that like short-term specific like paradigm surrounding goal orientation is really going to be a positive for the game at large. Now, how that ties in more to how I play the game with respect to crafting and stuff. Obviously, people, when you think of an action RPG or just playing a video game, right? Like, I can't tell you the amount of times where people, despite the fact it's obviously a very important part of the game and you're obviously still playing the game when you craft and trade, a lot of people just don't think of that. Like, when people think of playing the game, they think of killing monsters, picking stuff off the ground, right? And anything outside of that is kind of fluff. Now, in reality, is that true? No, but it still obviously is a widely held notion, and if for no other reason, that in of itself is meaningful, right? And the fact that they have tied these quest chains into each one of them having like some kind of crafting mechanic with it, whether they're implementing the rune system, right, or the fact that the expedition thing will have a craft tied to it. Breach has the crafting thing tied to it. I really like the one with delirium, where they mentioned, the amulets, for example. I got really stoked about that. And again, I'm sorry if these are non-specific references. I just thought, for the sake of fluidity of thought and honesty in my first interpretations of it, I'm not consulting anything. I'm just drawing this from the memories of 24 hours ago watching it. But specifically, I remember them with Delirium. They showed that it's going to be possible to get double anointed amulets. That's something that's possible in PoE 1, but like that's crazy good, because especially if they're on white bases too, right? You can force uniques so long as actually on amulets they'll often share a base, but you can technically use locks, I guess, with a chance. Or either way, though, you could theoretically turn a white amulet with 2 anoints even into a unique one, as long as it's a global drop. But beyond that, though, just having it as a crafting base is insanely strong, right? And what's cool with the notables too is that because of like heroic jewels, so the what's it called, heroic tragedy and undying hate. You don't necessarily need a notable for it to be valuable, right? You could have it be a notable that's like within range of a time lost jewel like this, right? Where it gives you, for example, Lone Warrior. I'm not going to spend 5 points going to Lone Warrior. I don't have auras on my build, but it would still get 13 spirit and 4 damage as extra lightning, right? And if you got this as like a second notable on an amulet base, while still having like a primary one that's like traditionally good, right? The market's probably not going to value that very highly, especially if they don't really have like a, some consistency between them, like thematically, where it's like both of them are crit oriented or whatever, right? That tends to be where people will like put the most value, is when, and this also applies to things like Megalomaniacs, where if there's like a consistency between what's presented, that's where people will put the most value, or they'll look at them in the absolute sense for, the objectively strongest notables, things like polymathy, jack of all trades, barbaric strength is really popular, storm charge, notables like that. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. So that's really cool, because like that by itself, even though the double anointments is not in of itself explicitly a crafting change, like that change itself, which is like, let's call it 1% of what they announced, that alone just opens up an entire new avenue, right? Like in the same way that exceptional items, when they added exceptional items, right? That just added like tripled the amount of available crafting for like every item in the game, basically, right? When you think about it, because where are we at here? 4 or 5, sorry. Oh, overgrown. Because like, let's say the before the announcement of exceptional items, all you had was like, you had to get the base of the appropriate item level, right? But then when they add exceptional, it's like, oh, now you can not only craft like a 6T1 item, you can craft a 6T1 item with an extra socket. Or you can craft that, so it's like doubling the total amount of available crafts, right? Or then they add the quality too. It's like, oh, that triples the amount of available crafts, because you could get a 6T1 item with with the extra socket, or get one with extra quality. And then when they made it so that you can add vol infusers, it was technically possible before that, but realistically not really obtainable. That then like quadrupled the amount of available crafting, because now you can get a 61 with a socket, a 61 with the quality, or a 61 with the quality and a socket, right? So it's like, even though that's not directly adding necessarily a crafting system, it's like quadrupling the like scalability of power, or like the, where it's like each one of those things might not, you might add 5% or 10% to the overall strength of an item, but when all of those little changes compound upon themselves, the end state of that item ends up being, and then you can add things like sanctification on top of that, right? Where it's like, oh, what did we get here? Exceptional shrines out there. Yeah, where like those smaller, like perceptibly smaller changes, when they are taken in their totality and they compound upon themselves, the net result of the final item can be like orders of magnitude stronger than the beginning state. And so while they might seem relatively minute in of themselves, they can be very, very big and important and impactful when taken in totality. Another thing with Delirium that really stuck out to me, and like this was actually the thing I got most jazzed about. Voices is back, baby. For those of you who played PoE 1, you're gonna know what Voices is. If you're not familiar with PoE 1, um, then Voices is probably the best. I'll refrain from calling it the best because I haven't played PoE 1 in a while, but uh, amongst the best unique items in the game in PoE 1, and certainly like if not the best, top three best unique jewels ever. What Voices does is like you put it in a jewel slot like this, right? And the Voices will give you like uh, 2 additional jewels, 3 additional jewels, or 4 additional jewels in Path of Exile 2 for the one they announced. So obviously by using it itself, like putting the Voices into the jewel slot, you lose that jewel slot. So, having if it was just 1 additional jewel, it would literally do nothing. So having 2 means that you get so right now there's 12 total jewels. So like a 2 would mean that you have 13 total jewels. 3 would mean you have 14, and 4 would mean you have 15, right? Um, like 15 usable. You'd have 16 total, but obviously Voices would be taking up one of them. Except you get rid of the travel points, right? So like not only does it help with the scarcity part of the things, right? Because obviously there's only 12 in totality, but at a certain point, like right here, typically it's 5 to 6 points to get to a jewel. But in this case here, right, for me to get to the next jewel, I have to spend 8 points, right? So here it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or over here, same thing. Now the next jewel after that, I could then get for 4 points. 1, 2, or sorry, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 points, right? So to get the next 2 jewels would be 13 points for me, no matter which path I went. So you'd be looking at 6.5 points in travel points just to get to that jewel slot. So obviously, that's probably not going to be cost efficient or point efficient. But Voices, it'll just pop out like the little lines right here, and in PoE 1, you have like an additional passive Voices. So it'll add 3 additional jewel slots always in PoE 1, and then it has additional passive points. So you'd have to there's a 1 passive Voices, 3 passive, 5 passive, and 7. So 1 passive Voices means that you have to spend 1 point here, which does nothing, and then the 3 jewels are immediately thereafter. So for 4 points, you get 3 jewels. The 3 passives, you have to spend 2 points. You get the 3 jewels, etc., etc. I didn't notice when they the Voices for PoE 2. The only thing that looked like it was distinguishing, and again, I'm just drawing from memory, so excuse me if this is incorrect, but they said the variability was going to be the amount of jewel sockets, not the amount of passives, which indicates to me that there is no additional passive cost. And if that is the case, damn, that's fucked, dude. Like fucked, because that means that you can get if you had 4 additional jewel slots here, right? And then obviously that actually ends up being 3. So you spend 4 points, right? And you get 3 additional jewel slots from that, net result, 3 additional jewel slots for 4 points. And on top of that, the jewels from Voices can get Adorned works on those jewels, right? They operate as normal jewel sockets do. I also don't remember it saying limit 1. It almost certainly will be limit 1, but if it's not limit 1 being that you can't have more than 1 of them, right here, obviously limited to 1 from nothing, you can't, whatever. In PoE 1 though, Voices is not limited to 1. You can have Voices in PoE 1 in all of your jewel slots. Because Voices in PoE 1, but as I said, is still considered to be one of the strongest items in the game ever. It has the additional passive point cost, right? And so even if you have a 1 socket one, it's still going to take the 4 points and the traveling out there. Plus in PoE 1, the majority of jewel slots are not necessarily carved out on the edges here. I'm guessing in PoE 2 it'll be the same thing, where it has to be on one of these outside track ones, which means that there's 6 options for them, right? But even if that's the case, I can't imagine a way where they'd be able to implement it unless it just moves the jewel slots. Maybe it is possible. I don't know. Anyways, the fact that it just adds 4 jewel slots, again, net result being 3, and there's no point variability, means like you could add. So like, let's say if you're hypothetically able to add them to 12 joules, right, and then you get 48. You get 48 joule slots as a result of that, right? On top of the 12 you already had, and so you now have 48 joules that are accessible. You put a door into one of them, and now you've got 47 joules uh, that can have 5 passive points on them each, like the 4 normal ones, plus corrupted for an additional one, plus twice corrupted for an enchantment, and you also have desecration, which can be used for jewel crafting, and they're adding a jewel crafting currency, and then adorned, whether they're magic or rare, can then multiply those by like upwards of times 1.75, or in the magic jewel case times 2.5, and it's and like I get like if I were like I'm not gonna make that reference. That's too dirty. I'm excited. We'll put it that way. It's just that's gonna be absurd, man. Like absurd. And then another thing they mentioned too was Mage Blood. They like very like offhandedly mentioned Mage Blood being re-added to the game. As far as I know, they didn't show a teaser for it. Mage Blood is historically Headhunter is probably the most like iconic, unique in PoE 1. But Mage Blood, if not first, would be the second most. And like from a historical lens, I'm not sure if Mage Blood is still the best. Again, my PoE 1 references are about a year and a bit outdated since I've been playing PoE 2. I haven't been keeping up to date with things, so excuse me if any of these are out-to-date references. But Mage Blood in PoE 1 makes in PoE 1 you have 5 flasks, right? Instead of 2 that you have in PoE 2, and they have various utilities, right? You get like move speed, resistances, armor, blah 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 blah. And the 5 flasks, you can get a Mage Blood that has between 2 to 4 of those flasks are applied permanently. So like rather than having to like piano like smash 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 in perpetuity on your keyboard, you like permanently have those flasks applied to like the effects of the flasks applied to your character. Now in PoE 1, what's this? Oh shit! Heart of the Well. Hot damn. Look at that. In PoE 1, you also have like enchantments that go on the flask that give like increased effect as well as like prefixes. Yada yada. Now in PoE 2, I don't think that Mage Blood is really. I can't think of a way that they'd be able to implement Mage Blood to apply to flasks. The obvious difference or like change to that to me would be that it applies to charms instead. And so, because charms sort of functionally work similar in PoE 2 to how flasks do in PoE 1, like with the exception, like you still have life and mana flasks in PoE 1, but charms are kind of like the utility flasks of PoE 2. In fact, it actually is basically the same thing. So you have 5 flasks in PoE 1, right? So PoE 2 is basically, if you were to think of charms as being flasks, imagine if you're thinking through a PoE 1 lens, imagine you have 5 flasks, but it forces you to use a mana flask and a life flask. PoE 1, you don't have to, like, you could put 5 utility flasks. But PoE 2, it kind of, if you were to reframe it through that lens, it's kind of how it works. And then charms basically function how, like, utility flasks do in PoE 2. Now, how Mage Blood works, because I suspect, again, that this is, Mage Blood will be charm application. It will take the, anything that can be applied permanently to scale. So anything that's on use won't apply. So like, okay, for example here, oh no, it grants immunity. Oh, wait, used upon frozen. Yeah, so like on Nascent Hope here, the chance to gain a charge when you kill an enemy, or sorry, rather the energy shield recharge starts on use. Right, because that starts on use, that wouldn't apply. Like, if it does work where it's like it applies your charms permanently, the on-use effect of Nascent Hope wouldn't apply, but the grants immunity to freeze would. So it would give you permanent freeze immunity, but the energy shield recharge, it's not like the Mage Blood wouldn't give you permanent energy shield recharge. However, on this one, on Fall of the Axe, right, where it says grants onslaught during effect, that would apply because it's not on use. It's just during effect. So, uh, just looking at this from a hypothetical, um, and again, yeah, rite of passage is on use. So, if it works like it does in PoE 1, you would get the rarity permanently, but you would not get the Spirit of the Stag permanently. But you would get Onslaught permanently. So we'll have to see how that's implemented. Again, I don't want to speak to this specifically because until we, like, once the item comes out, the patch notes come out, we'll know this very specifically. But the potential for that is obviously, like, as I'm sure most of you can surmise, absolutely insane. And, it might actually bring into the mix as well. Sorry, that was a glaring omission on my part. In PoE 1, Mage Blood only works on magic flasks. So if it's to follow suit in PoE 2, it might just apply to magic charms. And so that would actually change things substantially. There's such a gap between the strength of magic charms and unique charms that in terms of relative strength, I'm not sure if that would necessarily be worth it. But that might just be, my lens of personal experience skewing the potential strength of actual magic charms. I know you have things like Gain Guard. I don't know actually if that would even work or would be worthwhile relative to unique ones. We'll have to see how that's implemented. But anyways, keep your eyes out for that. Those are two of the uniques that they announced that definitely got my wheels turning a little bit. Now, I guess one of the reasons you're probably bothering to sit through this little ranting diatribe of mine about the league start or the my impressions of did we do this one already? Yeah, my impressions of the forthcoming league and patch is because I have the crafting focus. So I'll just say as like a broad kind of catch-all. Sorry. Where did I put that? Here. Let me get a dump tab here quickly. Sorry for the pause. As you can see, my capacity to multitask has not improved over the years. There we go. All right. Sorry. Oh shoot! I lost my train of thought. Damn it. Oh yeah, as a catch-all. The end game changes, the new pinnacle bosses, the content that is, let's say, playing focused, right? The goal orientation element of it, I think, is fantastic. Giving people concrete, like, instead of just having this abstract system where, okay, you finished the campaign, go to maps, it's infinite, figure something out, right? While obviously persons like myself and people that are really experienced, kind of either innately or, through having trial and error or previous leagues or whatever, might just already have like a plan in place on how to approach that, right? Like we're immediately going to focus on, like abyssal farming to generate currency, or we're going to gun it for pinnacle bosses or rush towers or whatever, right? For somebody who doesn't have that past experience, it kind of maybe is a little bit of a letdown to not have to not be guided in some direction to kind of initiate that. So not only do I think it'll bridge the gap a little bit better, but that pattern behavior development of again setting these smaller, achievable, realistic, what do they call them? SMART goals, right? Smart, measurable, obtainable, realistic, and time oriented. I think that's what the acronym is. And yeah, so I think that accomplishes that. And as well, I do like the fact that they revamped the rewards on them and made them more specific and tailored to each one. But the fact that each one of them also has its own unique crafting system, my impression was that Breach will have things with rings still probably as a thematic one, and the catalysts, with Delirium, it seemed like amulets with the anointments. and the what are they called? I read the what are the delirium currencies called again? Emotions. The emotions. Um, and yeah, the amulets themselves, kind of the amulet focus there, and then also sort of as a secondary with jewel focus, right, through voices and megalomaniac and stuff. So like each one of them, aside from the fact that you've got this like quest chain, um, it does also have like a crafting system where you can kind of have like an area of focus, right? And you know, uh, ooh, nice, 3,000 dips. Um, ooh, another, what's this? Ooh, 4,500 dips. Nice. Yeah, I think it can kind of be like a slow rolled introduction. I think, since you can like, what's like the sales technique term? Like, you ever seen like these memes about like timeshare sellers, where it's like they'll give you like a free trip to a location, but you have to like agree to sit. I don't actually know if this happens. I think I might even be thinking of a South Park episode where it's like, come to Aspen, 3 day free vacation, but you've got to sit through like a 3 hour seminar, which is them, a very aggressive sales technique to try and get you to buy like a share of a timeshare or whatever. And it's like or to be in a more sinister fashion, like a drug dealer giving somebody like a free hit of whatever drug because they know they're going to get addicted to it. It's kind of like, not to frame myself as a drug dealer, but I think the fact that they have these specific quest chains that will orient you towards one of these certain paths, and that they've tied each one of those paths to its own sort of crafting system or its crafting mechanic that also has like the gear focus tied to it. Um, the the quest chain and like the desire for goal orientation and to complete like the quests can kind of be like the proverbial first hit of crack to get people geared towards crafting, because it's not like this overnight. I think one of the problems, not to speak for people that struggle with crafting, because obviously I'm pretty far gone from that experience on a first-hand basis, but I think that it's like the feeling of being overwhelmed, right? The amount of totality of currency, the options, not like the expense of it. The fact that there's so many different bases, so many different modifiers, so many different tiers of those modifiers, which modifiers to pick, prefixes, suffixes, omens, currency, right? And it's just like, whoa, you know? And even though, again, because for myself, I know very specifically, like the systemic approach or the systematic approach to like, cutting out the noise on all of that, right? It's like 99% of that. Like if I for example, like there's only a few base types that are worthwhile to craft on, right? If I know I'm making like a fizz weapon, right? I know specifically I only need three prefixes, which are fizz, 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 right? So if you're making a crit weapon, it's like, all right, you're at crit skill gems and like typically like attack or cast speed, and maybe some variability there. But it's like things like stun threshold or like like life regen or like life gain on hit. These are like things that you just like. It's white noise, right? Like after you've like built that filtering skill set into how you assess items in crafting. But from a layman's perspective, obviously, you don't see things like that, right? It's almost like a loop filter, right? Like think of like crafting experience as being a loop filter for like itemization, where it's like if you don't have a loop filter installed and like you're playing the game, it's like there's 10,000 items in front of you. It's like you have like an epileptic seizure, like just trying to even grasp what's in front of you. But the second you apply a loop filter, it's like, oh, there's actually only like three things here that I need to pick up, or that have like the like, Actually, this is almost a perfect analogy. It's like you might have like a semi-strict loop filter on where it shows you like five things, but you've got a finite amount of inventory space, and like let's say two of them you think are worth picking up, right? Crafting can be approached in sort of a similar fashion, where it's like, all right, on the suffixes, right? Even though there's like, if you include tiers and modifiers, like 300 options, realistically, in terms of the actual mods, we can cut the bulk of them out. And let's say your realistic considerations are like crit bonus, crit chance, attack speed, skill gem level. Um, I can't even think of anything else in that case, or maybe like a desecrated modifier, right? And it's like you pick three out of those. And it's like, okay, so you got a couple options there, and then you have the tiers. It's like, well, okay, you maybe let's say it's a league start, you want like at least tier 3+ or something like that, right? And all of a sudden, instead of having the equivalent of a non-loot filter in place, when you approach the craft, it's like all of a sudden, this immeasurably complex calculation gets distilled into something where, you've got five options, pick three choices, right? And obviously because of that, it's like paralysis analysis gets alleviated. And one of the I think, I don't know if it's an intended consequence, but one of the things I anticipate happening as a result of them orienting people on these specific quest chains that then have a crafting system or mechanic tied to it, is that people will be slow rolled into approaching crafting, because it's like, for example, if you get a double anointment amulet, or you get like a ring, or if you're using those gloves, for example, where you can use the currency on them, or you're playing the build there, it's like you have kind of a myopic lens to get introduced to this thing, right? And you might find that you enjoy it, right? Or that it's profitable. That's another thing too, right? Every time you separate a system, like one of the problems with PoE 2 patch 0.4, so the one that I'm currently playing, is that while it didn't cover everything, Temple basically covered everything in the game, right? There were only two things really that it didn't cover, and that was abyssal currency and omens, right? And which is why this league, like in standard, omens are like 5 to 10 divs, but in league they're like 100 divs. Why is that? Because they're like the only thing that are a necessary material in producing high-end items that doesn't come from Temple, right? You can do Temple to get raw currency drops across the spectrum, exceptional currency, T0 uniques, exceptional uniques, you run zero rarity or negative rarity, exceptional bases, right? So you have like a catch-all that serves everything, and as a result, you get this massive inflation of the relative cost of the alternative items, because it is so much more efficient to focus on this one thing that covers 95% of what you'll need, instead of the 5%, instead of like two things that each represent 5% in totality. And so by breaking apart, the focus into, like, let's say 4 separate paths that have 4 separate, like one focus on amulets, one of them, focuses on like rings. The other one has like the rune stuff. And again, I'm just drawing from memory here, so I'm sure they probably gave more specifics on it. I was getting a little bit overwhelmed watching it, as I'm sure most of you have, but until they give the actual patch notes on these, it's kind of irrelevant anyways. But just the fact that they have these systems tied to a specific path, that should add, because that innately cooks in an opportunity cost for focusing on that, right? And I think they did actually touch on this in the Q&A, but that actually should cause price stabilization, assuming that there is some degree of elasticity in the market, because if let's say like going north and focusing on that area is the most lucrative path to go in on like day 13, right? Like in an absolute sense, the crafting currency that comes from it, or the result of using the crafting system itself, let's say it gives you a 5 div, it grants 5 divs as the average outcome for doing that system, or for gaining one of those currency items. And like the west one is 4 divs, the south one is 3 divs, and the east one is 2 divs, right? If a shit ton of if 80% of the player base starts going to that 5 div north route, right? Right, there is probably some degree of neglect now happening to south, west, and east, so their prices will likely rise, right? And B, because so many people are now focusing on the northern route, their price will drop, because there will be an oversupply. And again, assuming that there's elasticity and people are being rational consumers or producers in this case, the market should auto adjust to match that out, right? If there is too little demand, or too much demand, or too little supply, or too much supply, because people have these specific goal-oriented and defined outcomes where, again, by doing it, you are not doing something else, right? So it has that opportunity cost. The market should, in of itself, achieve some level of, not necessarily perfect equilibrium, but at least a far more balanced thing, to the point that you're not going to see, like, again, if we look right here, a lot of people freak out about the fact that mirrors are like 10,000 divs in this league. which I agree when you take a historical lens, is a crazy value, but it in of itself is not that meaningful outside of the annoyance of inventory space and stuff. Um, so long as everything else is relative, right? Because mirrors have a proportionate relationship to like the basic currencies, but because all of these are like the relationship between the rarity of each one of these is not changed by running temple. That in of itself doesn't actually change anything. Again, aside from like the quality of life irritants, but where it does impact it is that, and this is why mirror crafting actually worked well this league, because again, if you're focusing on getting all of these, that means that you're not doing like maps to get abyss currency. And if you look, like an Omen of Light is 78 divines. If you look, a Omen of Whitling is 84 divines. And it's like, okay, well, the proportionate relationship between a mirror and an Omen of Whitling, which is like your most standardized kind of, item that you would pursue for high-end crafting, right? Obviously, you have the sinestral and dextral erasures and annulls as well in that mix. Um, Generally speaking, what you want to do with crafting is try and defer the use of these as long as you can, because that will tend to be the bulk of your cost. Um, Notwithstanding sanctifications and potentially locks being used to get 30 quality or a perfect fracture. Just in terms of modifier allocation, right? If you can get, like you fracture one mod, chaos the next mod, right? Maybe essence the mod after that, desecrate the mod after that, essence the second suffix. It's like, all right, if we can narrow it down to only having to whittle one modifier, right? Like that's typically how you're going to cost cut, like in terms of setting out like a strategic plan for the items you're making. Trying to minimize the amount of omens that you use is generally the biggest potential area of savings, or when considering there's three factors that in terms of quantifying expected value outcomes with crafting, which is you take the material costs and then the probability being it's reverse engineered through the what do you call it, recombinator, and so the weights of modifiers are known and publicly available. And then the material cost, while they are in flux throughout the course of the league, at any given moment they are static, right? You can check at, like right now, like obviously 84 they might be 50 divs 3 weeks earlier, but at this exact moment I know there are 84 divs, right? So I take, okay, if the weights of the probability make it 1 in 10 to reach our desired outcome, right? And we know that it's 84 divs per. That means that the average expected crafting cost is 840 divines, right? So those are the two first things you need to know. And then the final thing is knowing the sale price of your desired outcome. So let's say the item that we're trying to make as a result of that let's say it's 1,000 divs, right? So we know the average crafting cost is 840. The average sale price is 1,000. That means the expected value of doing so is plus 160 divines. Now we have to take into account the variability, right? Or the variance. If something's a 1 in 1,000, there's obviously a far greater likelihood than if something's like a 1 in 4 for you to fall outside of that expected value in terms of the outcome, both on the lucky side or the unlucky side, if you want to phrase it that way. So there's that consideration as well. And then you also have to look into okay, is the net result of what I'm trying to make, like is the final product, is it something that has a positive appreciation curve over time, right? So if I don't sell this immediately, will it gain value or will it lose value? One of the ways that people lose money, like the I won't say it's the biggest mistake, but it's a big mistake, is that people see something become really popular or really meta early on. Let's say whatever Fub Gun's playing, right? People are like, okay, everyone's playing this skill, craft items for this skill, right? Like craft a bow, craft a wand, whatever it is. Oh, this is the most popular skill, craft for that. Now, the flaw in the logic for that is that when you're crafting to something like that, that's on the basis of sentiment or, perceptions of popularity, or because it is perceptibly meta, or you're just trying to sell it to the general consumer, is that those items are often going to be temporary in their in their use case, right? So they're very often not going to be like tier one modifiers, right? They're purpose built for the short term, right? Like you're looking at a bow that will have its maximum marginal utility be represented from, let's say, day 1 to day 3, at which point it will get outscaled by the general progression of of items that drop or that are available. And B is that if everyone starts making the same thing, right? Because the game doesn't have soul-bound items, right? PoE has effectively, not to falsely equivocate this to like Reaganomics or anything, but like trickle-down economics are a real thing in PoE, or trickle-down itemization. Because items aren't soul-bound, right? You have the gear floor, right, consistently elevating, because not only do you have an increase in the items dropping, it's very rare for items to drop in like a usable state. I shouldn't say a usable state, but like up like like in a state where they won't need any. Oh, what do we just sell? 33 gifs. Pump change. Where they're like going to be, and again, notwithstanding, maybe the first couple days you might actually find items where it's just throw in a rune and you're good to go. But by and large, after like 3 days into the league, basically everything is going to be purpose crafted, or altered in some way, whether that's like through chaos orbs or exalts at the basic level, or essences maybe, all the way down to like mirror crafting. You still do obviously have like let's say an hour into the league, there's 100 bows in total that have dropped. Like 5 hours into the league, there's probably 10,000 bows that have dropped. A day into the league, there's like 100,000 bows that have dropped. Now, obviously, not everything that drops shows up on the market, but the point being that the overall amount of pulls of the slot machine effectively means that that number of total items just dropping in a natural state is constantly going up, right? Then on top of that, you have the purpose-built items through the form of crafting that are also being purpose-built, right? And so, again, speaking to like the cognitive or the fallacy of a lot of people's early league approaches, is that they'll say something that's popular, right? And they'll see a lot of people driving towards what is popular. Now, why do people, again, if you just take some sort of behavioral psychology or behavioral economics into consideration here, why are people driven to play this thing early on, right? There's an element of it that is, consensus can often override logic, or that it's easy to mistake an upvote or a view count as a measure of validity. But it more typically from like a fundamental standpoint, it's typically because that build or that item or whatever has the perception of relative power, or relative marginal utility in the immediate, right? So what I mean by that is that people will try to play the cheapest build with the highest outcome. Now, obviously, outcomes are not universal in PoE, right? You could be trying to race, you could be trying to benchmark against boss killing, you could be trying to min-max, you could be trying to magic find as much as you can, you could be trying to do achievements, which have been re-added, another thing that's certainly a good thing, especially with respect to goal orientation, and also to extend, I think, like the league cycle in terms of like overall player. Sorry, excuse me for a second while I drink. Overall player retention. But oh god, sorry, I lost my train of thought again. League cycle, overall player retention. Oh man, I'm really sorry, guys. I might have to open my Twitch chat. Twitch chat, can somebody help me? What was I saying? Anyone there? Anyway, sorry, I might be repeating myself here. Sorry, Twitch, I'll close Twitch again. Let me digress a bit. What I was saying was that obviously you have the natural appearance of more items coming from drops, right? Then you have the purpose-built ones from people making them for crafting. And with respect to like the fallacies or the flaw in the logic of trying to produce something because you perceive it to be popular, right? The reason why people pursue these things or why they are popular in the first place is because they seem strong relative to the fact that you're on the first day or the second day, right? Now, obviously, that is a very short term and kind of myopic lens to take for a league that is, traditionally they're 3 month leagues, but realistically, this one is going to beyond. They already said that this is the last league until 1.0. ExileCon is in November, and it's not coming. 1.0 is not till after that. I'm sure they're probably aiming for a Christmas release. So let's say that we know that this league is going to be, it's the end of May, so let's call it like June 1st. So you got June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So this is likely going to be between a 6.5 and 7 month league, right? So while it's hard to maybe not, like there's obviously the natural impulse to try and satisfy immediate perceptible needs. Um, you know, uh, Taking something like your league start and framing it through the lens of what's going to benefit you in the next day to day and a half versus taking the extended viewpoint that league is 230 days long or whatever. When you look at it through that frame, it's like, okay, maybe I should take a step back here and think about what the consequences of this are. And again, this is one of these great fallacies that a lot of people have, is that uh, things that are popular early on tend to be popular because they are strong, or they are playable right away relative to the difficulty of the content that you're doing, right? So they can get through like the early layers of maps. They're relatively quick. They require a relatively low gear ceiling, right? They don't have very expensive uniques necessary for them, right? They're purpose built for accomplishing very easy tasks and getting you streamlined, I guess, or initiated to that process of character progression or atlas progression or boss progression or whatever that goal is, right? Now that's perfectly fine when you're doing that for like your own use case and to use that as like a sort of an economic stepping stone in which to progress. But where the problem lies is that a lot of people see people doing that and then they start crafting items purpose built for those people, right? Because let's say this is not. I'm just going to use this as an example because it's probably relatable to some people. Let's say Fubgun is playing Lightning Arrow and he's using, what's that called? An Obliterator bow, right? And he's got like, triple fizz, whatever. He's got fizz, like +5 and surpassing chance or something like that. All right. And you go look on like PoE Ninja and you go look on Twitch and you see a lot of people are playing with, Lightning Arrow because whether or not it's entirely from Fubgun is kind of irrelevant, but let's say a lot of people are playing Lightning Arrow with an Obliterator bow. Okay? And so in your mind you go, okay, this is popular, this is meta, this is what I should craft for. Right? That's where the money is going to be. Now, what that ignores is the fact that the stuff that you're going to be crafting, right? The need that is being filled by the build archetype in of itself is the accessibility or like the low entry point to being able to do what amounts to the game's easiest content, right? So that is going to get outscaled very quickly, right? Like the need that you're fulfilling has a very finite window in terms of its marginal utility, right? Like that item, if it's not being sold within like a day to 3 days, it's going to have, in terms of its actual like fundamental value in terms of what it provides as an item itself, not its like relative market value, is going to be basically zero. And this compounds with the fact that the game itself is progressive, so there's always more items being added to the overall economy. But also, when I spoke about the trickle-down itemization, you have to keep in mind, too, there aren't soul-bound items. And so when I get an upgrade, I sell my previous version, right? So if I had, let's say there's an arbitrary item power scale of 1 to 10, right? And on day 1, I'm using, or day 2, I'm using like a 2 out of 10, right? And I find on day 3 or 4, I find an item that's like a 5 out of 10, right? I'm then going to sell my 2 out of 10, right? Now, if you're a viewer of like Fubguns, let's say, and you're watching on day 2 and you see him using an Obliterator bow and a lot of other people using Obliterator bows with these specific mods, right? And you start crafting a 2 out of 10 item because your optic is that there's a lot of people using this 2 out of 10 very specific item, right? Not only do you have this surge in supply because if you're sharing that sentiment, a lot of other people likely are as well. But you then also have the people that are actually at the forefront of this, further doubling down on the supply of these items, because they'll be selling the ones who are actually like at the aspirational reasons in which why the masses are pursuing this ambition, right? The actual people they're pursuing are no longer using this item that they think they're using, right? And they're actually selling the item that other people are making, and they're moving on to the next version of it. And then everyone else is basically left holding the bag on these items that they think that they're using. So they buy them thinking it's like progressive. But again, because you have the surge in supply from the people crafting them, and then the additional supply from the people that are actually at the forefront selling their older items, that by itself is problematic. But then you realize, since they are they're purpose built for this very narrow window of time, you have a demand curve that falls off the cliff, right? So not only do you have this ever increasing supply from three sources: the crafters, the item drops, and then the sales of the initial users, but you also have the fact that the demand for those items, because they don't have a long-term value proposition, uh, with every passing like hour, gets lower and lower and lower, and eventually you hit a tipping point where the net profitability goes from like zero, or effectively zero, into the negative. And the problem that a lot of people have with crafting is that often they're too late to realize this, right? It's like they start crafting when that is approaching zero, or it's very low, like the net profit per craft. Let's say it's like a divine, right? And like that might seem like a lot on like day one or day two. Oh shit! Like I could, this very simple craft that everyone's using sells for like 2 divs, and I can make it for 1 div. Like, oh my god, that's crazy! Like I could get whatever build enabling unique on it. Like, make it, right? And a lot of people won't test their assumptions either, right? They'll just they'll watch a YouTube video and see that like maybe someone like myself, or someone like Fubgun, or someone who has some sort of audience, sold 30 pairs of these gloves or boots or whatever it is, and made 30 divs overnight while they were sleeping. And it's like, oh shit, all right, now I've got like this confirmation bias. All right, the math checks out from the way they did it. And you go out and craft like 20 or 30 of them, right? And not recognizing, that the cost accounting for that item has dramatically changed since the recording time or the recording date of what you're watching, but also because the item that you're likely making is purpose built for a very narrow window of time. The actual use case for that item itself has been dramatically reduced from what you perceive it to be, and the phenomena I just mentioned, where you have those, the overall increase of naturally dropping items, the purpose-built crafting items, the sale of previously used items, and the drop-off of demand, all happening simultaneously, to a point that people then trick themselves, or like convince themselves that crafting is pointless, or that either like the crafting video they watched was deceptive, or that it's just a gamble, or like whatever reason, right? And it can probably seem like that in the moment, but I'm not sure if I did a good job articulating this or not, but there's actually a multivariate approach, or a multivariate reasoning as to why you're kind of, whether it's intentional or not, inadvertently directing yourself towards, at best, abject mediocrity, and in many cases, a financial loss. And one of the problems, too, that can happen in these situations is that people don't take very good accounting of what their actual results are. And so, something might inevitably sell like a few days later at cost, right? Like, let's say you spent like a div on something and you end up selling it for a div, but it took like 4 days, where it's like, okay, mentally, you've balanced out your checkbook there, so to speak. But like the time value of currency, especially at the beginning of PoE, is dramatic, right? Because of the hyperinflation that occurs on most stores of value as currency is pertained. or as it pertains to currency. And so like the relative purchasing power of like an exalt or a chaos orb or a divine is dramatically reduced, right? To use a sort of meme financial term, think of the beginning of leagues as money printer go brrr, right? Um, an hour into the league, there might be 100 divs in circulation. 2 hours, 1,000. 3 hours, 10,000. Right? It's like, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this before, where it's like, you know, you want to get a divine to buy like your first unique item. Let's say, yeah, it costs 1 div, all right, and you go to look when you first check the item, and then that divine costs 25 exalts. So you sell your currencies into your mixed currencies into exalts. You start doing your first map after finishing campaign, right? And like let's say it was 25 exalts. So you get to 23 or 24 exalts, right? Like you go to like sell your transmutes into the last exalt you need. You go to buy the divine, and now that divine is like 55 exalts, and you're like, what the fuck, right? And it feels like either you're getting outpaced by the economy or that like that there's some sort of system working against you. And it's, I mean, I shouldn't say the system's working against you. The system doesn't have feelings, but there are ways to combat this, right? And that's where the whole like appreciating assets idea or concept comes into it, where it's like all when I say appreciating assets, all it is because you can economize or trade everything in PoE, right? There's no soulbound items, right? So if I have a mirror, or I have, a mirror could be represented as 6,000, whatever the mirror cost is. Like, it doesn't, obviously you can check this at any finite point in the league. Okay, 9,700 divs, right? A mirror can be a mirror, or it can be 9,700 divines, or it could be 200,000 chaos orbs, or it could be 5 Hinokoros locks, or whatever it is, right? At any exact moment, that mirror in terms of net worth, or as an asset or a store of value, maybe the term store of value would be easier to digest. At that exact moment, you have this relationship where it reflects, like let's say I find a mirror drop, it's day 2. Okay, at that exact moment, I write down exactly what that mirror could be worth in terms of various different stores of value. Okay, at that exact moment, it could be reflect 500 divines. Okay, or it could reflect 10,000 chaos orbs, or it could reflect, really early on in the league, it might be like a headhunter, right? Like, oh, first headhunter. Oh, that's really gonna set me up for success, right? These are common thoughts that people have. Now, when I talk about appreciating assets, it's like, if you could hold on to that mirror, right, for a week, all right, and then check back in, all right, what's that mirror now worth in every one of these other various asset classes, right? Oh, now instead of 500 divines, it's worth 2,000 divines, or maybe it was worth 5 locks, now it's worth 7 locks, right? They're not always going to work in perfect harmony, right? Now, stores of value are often best kept in things that are not necessarily obvious. The most obvious and easiest ones in almost every case are going to be locks and mirrors, right? If you don't want to investigate this and you just want to find out, locks and mirrors, simplest way. But the actual best stores of value are almost always going to be in items, right? And the big problem that a lot of people have is that rather than recognizing this and putting their early currency into the best stores of value, which will passively gain, gain money, like, you make money, earn money kind of thing, right? It's like the wealthiest people in the world aren't ones that work salary or like wage jobs, right? It's not like getting, you go from minimum wage, like $6.50 an hour to, $30 an hour. It's like, all right, I'm truly going to make it when I get up to $500 an hour. It's like, yeah, you can have like a relatively it's not like you can't make a living off of a job where you get paid by the hour, but you're never going to crack a Forbes list. You're never going to, there's obviously a very finite earning potential there, right? Because your input being like the time that you spend doing it, and your output being what you get from that time, is hard capped based on what your, that earning potential is in that defined window, which in the case of, wage job would be like, $20 an hour. But in the case of PoE, if you look at like mapping or any kind of short-term investing through that lens, it's like a map only has a finite amount of mobs in it, right? And each one of those mobs has a finite amount of items they drop. and those items, after like rarity calculations, whatever, have a finite amount of outcomes. It's like even if you have the 1 in 10 trillion chance that each one of those mobs drop their absolute best outcome in every single situation, there's still a ceiling on the potential for earnings there, right? So your input being your time and your output, one is fixed and one is variable, right? In a mapping situation, what is fixed is your output. So what you can generate wealth wise. Whereas what is variable is your input. The only thing that you can change in a map is how quickly you do it, right? And because of that, the gains that you get from mapping are additive, right? So when I spend X amount of time, if I get 20 divs from this map and I do another map, next map, I can get 20 divs, 20 divs. It's plus, 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 right? Whereas trading, crafting, and investing are multiplicative or exponential, right? So what is variable when you're crafting something is the output. So how much you can earn. What is relatively fixed is the input. It takes the same amount of time to buy and sell a 1 div item as it does a 1 transmute item, as it does a 1 mirror item. Now crafting, obviously, like making a perfect mirror item, does take longer than like throwing an alch on something, but still it is a very, like, you know, once you get to a certain threshold of item crafting, it's like the window is still relatively fixed. In Path of Exile 0.4, there's not a single item in the game that would take me longer than an hour to craft. Not one. Perfect mirror item, no problem. Give me an hour, done. Right? The only thing that actually is an impediment to that time is the acquisition of either like gold, omens, whatever. But assuming you have the materials available to you, the actual process of making them is very fixed. But that being said, the outputs from that action is what can change, right? And in particular, this is compounded, like exponentially compounded by the fact that you have offline trading now, right? Because previously in PoE, there was at least some time friction or some time, because really the only exhaustible resource in PoE is time, right? Like the league is defined by its finite window. It's like your life, right? Like your life has a birthday and a death, right? And everything in between, it's like that totals to like the experience of your life. Do you have a good life, bad life, whatever? Think of a league the same way. Do you have a good league, bad league? Obviously, that's gonna, you know, there's qualitative things like what are your goals, right? That's why I said goal orientation is so important, you know. But if you do want to be wealthy and you do want to have like success is always relative in PoE, right? It's not like there's a ladder that says this is the wealthiest person, right? So you're just comparing yourself. Like again, the Buddhists I think like to say that comparison is the thief of joy. Oh, how did I get this much? But if you do decide that is like the ecosystem you want to operate in, where you take your perceptions of what is like the sort of operational zeitgeist or what like the average person is making or earning, and you want to you know, do better than them in a relative sense, what I'm saying here is something that you need to factor in, and in particular what you need to factor in early on in the leagues. And yeah, so the exponential or multiplicative nature of crafting, trading, or investing, as it were, is compounded by the fact that you don't have to, again, because the only actual exhaustible resource is time. In Path of Exile 1, before offline trading was introduced, right, you're not going to want to list a million items at one divine, because the amount of time it would take to like get the whisper, to invite the person, to like leave your map, to go to the hideout, to do the trade, to say thank you, to go back to the map, right? It's like at a certain point that the opportunity cost becomes too high from a time sink perspective, right? And so you do have to like factor that in the same way that you would with mapping. But because the proceeds of any investment, craft, or trade can be put through the offline trader, where again, you now have a fixed input cost, an input cost being the time, and the output no longer has any correlation whatsoever with your time, right? Whatever amount of time it takes to make a trade, or to buy an item, or to craft an item, or to invest in an item, that is a single-use situation where now you can like list it, have either a set breakpoint, so like you're doing an ROI-based thing, which is where it become multiplicative. So like, let's say you craft something that has a 10 div average crafting cost with a sale price of 13 divs. That's a 30% margin. right? So you're doing that where it's, you know, and again, you do have compounding rates of return where this becomes, again, multiplicatively scaling and higher, so exponential. Um, you can also have things where it's like if you invest into something knowing that it will, as again, coming back to the term, a store of value, its store of value will outpace the generalized inflation. Like you're literally, you're not, your input is not even, it becomes, again, exponential scaling, right? Because you're not doing something where it's like a fixed ROI, but where it, again, where it is, you know, the further you wait, the more value it gains. And there are various asset classes that does exist for. And I'll spare you the specifics on those because it does vary league to league. Again, archetypal uh, categories sort of exist therein, but sorry. Hmm. Um, you know, I think it would actually be counterproductive for me to list off a few of those right now. But just know that they do exist, right? And so, um, I think I'm kind of sorry mixing a couple of concepts here. Not mixing them, but uh, before I finish talking about why crafting towards the meta early on is often counterproductive, I think I then transitioned into um, talking about distinguishing between the additive gains of mapping um, with respect to inputs and outputs versus the multiplicative or exponential gains associated with crafting, currency trading, um, investing, flipping, whatever, right? Um, and so I guess all of this to kind of put a bow onto it with respect to how the new league announcements impact this is that um, I think that you'll have a lot more of a variability in the actions of people early on. Obviously, the more options that there are, perceptibly, like if you approach this from like a logical standpoint, you would assume that the more options there are, the more variability there will be in the decisions of the players in response to that, right? My observation has been that often is not necessarily the case, and sometimes it's actually the opposite, where it's like the more shit that's going on, the more people are going to be overwhelmed. So the more inclined they're going to be to aggregate towards who they perceive to be thought leaders or experts on the topic. And again, the problem with being ignorant on something is that you are also ignorant of your ignorance. And so the people that are the most likely to seek out help are also the same people who are like the least likely to be able to distinguish between or to measure the merit of that help or the validity of the advice being offered. And that kind of creates this self-perpetuating cycle, which can be doubly as bad because the sort of categorical type of advice that they get, they become accustomed to it, right? And that becomes an expectation to the point that when people who are actually telling them stuff that can actually set them up, like think of it, give a man a fish, teach a man how to fish, right? That for so long they've been just giving fish that when they see content that is teaching them to fish, or when they're receiving advice that is teaching them to fish, they're repelled by it because it is unfamiliar to them, and because they've conditioned themselves, and because they have again the confirmation bias from the what they perceive to be consensus or meta or the wisdom of crowds or the upvote or the view count as a measure of validity. They dismiss what is actually going to help them. And what is the net result of this? They are striving en masse to abject mediocrity in perpetuity by design. And again, it's very difficult for somebody stuck in that cycle to recognize the error of their thinking or the logic that underpins their actions, because every like visual or social indicator they have is telling them that they're doing the right thing, right? And so therefore, the blame must not exist with the action or the person. The blame exists in like the systems or the competitors in that environment, right? I can't tell you the amount of people, despite the fact that I literally stream all my gameplay, and I've been doing this for 15 years, where if I post a video where I make an amount of currency, even if I show how I'm doing it, give the math, like do it live, the amount of people that will comment on a video like that being like, fuck this RMTing piece of shit, right? It's like, is that a rational way to respond to that? No. Why are they responding to that? Because it is so in excess of what their, their finite scope or a lens of experience tells them is possible, that they can't imagine a world where they're that ineffective or inefficient, and therefore it is much easier sort of cognitively to excuse your own behavior or lines of thinking by dismissing the, even like observable success, demonstrative success of the other person by saying that they're doing something illegal, or they're cheating, or they have some unfair advantage that you don't have, and that there's no personal culpability taking a role in that. And one of the, again, sort of self-defeating or self-sustaining cycles that exists here is that, and again, I don't mean this to shit on anyone like this, but and again, Fubgun's very talented what he does. Obviously, that's why he has the audience. Don't take this as a shot at him. But one of the things that makes people like Fubgun seem really successful with the way that they approach the beginning of a league is the fact that they are the first to market. They are the thought leader therein. And so when they do something, whatever build he's playing, whatever, passives he goes for, whatever items he crafts for himself, right? He's buying those typically at the lowest cost, at a very high supply early on, right? And then he uses them, right? People observe him using them. They observe his success, right? And then by the time he has achieved that success to the point that there is a reaction from the market to it, he is on to the next state of what he's doing. What's the result of that? Not only does he get those items, whether or not they're temporary, and to be fair, at a league start, it's very hard to cover the totality of considerations you're making, especially if you're trying to be competitive in laddering, getting the early currency, and like in the case of somebody like Fubgun, like writing a mobalytics guide or something like that. It's not like you can sit there and articulate every single internal thought. But in reality, not only is he getting things initially when nobody else is using them, or when very few people are using them, and so it's kind of like an optimal time to get them, but by the time he stops using them, or if he makes a decision or a consideration that whatever it was he was doing is in fact not the correct thing to do, he then gets to sell whatever he was using effectively to at a premium, like not at a market value, at an extreme premium, because the people that are watching him think that that is the thing to do, because they are always lagging behind. And that can actually be, in some cases, a greater net contributing factor to the overall viability of whatever he or persons like him are perceptibly doing than the actual action itself, right? If I spend a div on an item and then everyone sees me doing that and I'm doing successful, or I have some success, thousands of people are watching, which can represent like an actual significant proportion of the active player base early on in leagues. And to the point that that item is now like 10 divines, right? And it's like, okay, I'm upgrading an item once every 6 hours because it's the beginning of a league, and it's very easy to, obviously you have very transitory items early on. And it's like, all right, that item I spent 1 div on, 6 hours from now, I don't need it anymore, so I get a new item, right? I spend like 5 divs on that new item, and then I sell that 1 div item, which actually has a lower fundamental value now than it did 6 hours ago, because again, it is, as we discussed earlier, a very temporary item in its use case. In spite of that, paradoxically, that item has 10x'd in value because the sentiment, or like the fervor, or the mass delusions of a captive audience have created an artificial demand that has spiked its price relative to its supply. And so that 1 div item I just bought, and like, this is not the fault of Fubgun, by the way, and I don't think he or anyone that does stuff like this is the phenomena I'm expressing. I don't think that they do this like maliciously or intentionally. It's just the net result of what happens. The 9 div profit that he sees that bow he bought for 1 div is selling for 10 divs, right? And not only does he make 9 divines from that now, which might actually be a greater contributing factor to the overall currency he's making in that day. Again, because you have you've got 11, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, plus your jewels, blah, 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 right? You've got like 15 or 20 of these individual things, right? If you have 15 and 20 to 20 things that you're like cycling upgrades on like once every few hours, and you're getting a significant and noticeable rate of return on those um, consistently, not because they actually have any value, but because the people watching you think they have value, and so you know you're gaining the money not off the action itself, but off the audience's perception of the action. Um, there's two things that are negative about that. Number one, it's not real, right? And the audience doesn't know that because if they did, they wouldn't buy it in the first place. But because they see him profiting off of the act, like, right? It's like if he crafts this for one div and it sells for 10, somebody sees the one div craft and thinks that that one div craft is actually worth 10, right? As if the 10 is reflective of the value of the item, not the fact that there are thousands of people responding to the item itself thinking that it's viable. And obviously that falls off a cliff, which again with no shot at Fub Gun, there's a reason why most of these guys stop playing after like 2 or 3 weeks, because this economic model is not sustainable in the long term. Not only because of the additive nature of mapping, as we discussed earlier, so the relative value prospectus it has as when compared to people focused on all the alternatives economically, but also because the fundamentals of what is providing a significant portion, sometimes a majority portion, of the actual economic output that they have is contingent on a captive audience propping up the value of assets that have no long-term value case or value proposition. Um, and like this is a and this is not exclusive to Fub by any means. It's really anyone with a large enough audience, even if it's not explicitly directed towards them to go after these things. It's just if 1,000, even if like 20 people are watching you, right, that can have a market impact. But you start getting into the hundreds, and certainly when you get into the thousands, just the fact that people are watching, when they observe you, people will act upon that, whether you explicitly tell them to or not. But if you're constantly updating like a mobalytics guide, right, and you don't have time to do a whole write-up yet, but you have your gear in there, right, like that, like, if there's not a mention that this bow is one that I found in a map, and it's just I'm using it to upgrade from the one that I was using 2 hours earlier, because I'm more focused on getting levels right now. It's like people aren't going to know that are looking up like early league Fub Gun build guide, right? They just see the item that's listed there. They go out and they oh shit, okay, that's what I need to get, right? And so like it's ultimately self-defeating in so many like multivariate ways that it like crushes me, because the most frustrating part is that the people that do this the most frequently are also like they're usually not usually, but they're the ones most willing to die on the hill of their own ignorance, because their decision making is very often supported by perceived expertise or by externalized factors like the wisdom of the crowd, or what they perceive to be meta, or just looking at raw use numbers on PoE Ninja, or the fact that like the top viewed streamers doing it, right? They can't actually substantiate the merit, like the actual quantitative reasoning behind that action. Um, that creates like a dissonance, right? And it's like for them to be incorrect would shatter a worldview, and so they're often the same people that even if you illuminate the error of their ways, they won't thank you for it. They'll argue with you and tell you why you're wrong and why they're right, or why they did what they're doing, right? As if, and like this will be in the face of objective, like mathematically, like data-driven points. Like if I could draw a parallel, imagine somebody had like was trying to tell you that the number 5 is greater than the number 7. That is a higher number. Because 5 is their favorite number, or because they saw. This is not actually a good analogy, but anyways, the point is, you kind of have to get out of this circle jerk of thinking if you want to be successful early on. If you just take like a logical approach to it, meta, like when things refer to the meta, another term for meta is just like convention, right? Or consensus or popular opinion. Um, yeah, conventional wisdom, right? It's effectively the distilled sort of colloquial term for PoE's conventional wisdom within whatever period of time. And if you just apply logic, what is the only logical possible outcome if you follow conventional wisdom? Obviously, it is to have a conventional outcome, right? Conventional wisdom would lead to conventional action, and conventional action will lead to a conventional outcome. Now, what is convention geared towards? Right? If it's a measure of consensus or of popularity, then inherently that is the aggregate, the average, right? So if you have an average viewpoint leading to an average action, it can only logically lead to an average outcome. And so if your goal is to have a quote unquote good league start, which again, as I mentioned earlier on, it's very important to have concrete goals because qualitative ones like good, strong, wealthy, rich, better, best, but they're meaningless, right? How many YouTube videos have you seen like best build, best strategy, best boom? And it's like best by what measure? How are you quantifying this? Like not to mention like best also has to be put through some definitive framework because it's not like you're playing like Snake on an old Nokia, right? There's multiple things to do. Best what? Best magic finding build, like the best min maxing benchmark against like a pinnacle boss, like the best for tempo runs, the best mobility, the best crafting. There's again the considerations are many. And so qualitative terms really don't have any meaning, but ultimately they're the easiest ones to attach yourself to emotionally because the subjective and qualitative operate within the same realm, like a mental model or framework, whereas the quantitative and objective operate in the same framework as well. And if you're trying to have measurable improvements in outcomes, or like you're trying to improve your outcomes, improvement has to be measured, right? Like, especially if you're seeking out advice, right? I want to have a better league start than last league start. All right, cool. Better doesn't mean anything. So quantify for me what you're referring to with respect to where your aspirations lie in improvement, right? Okay, last league start, I made 5 divs by the 3rd day and I fell behind. All right, so 5 divs is your baseline. So you want to improve? That means we have to get better than 5 divs, right? There's your you have to quantify what you might perceptibly like think of as qualitative. You need to quantify in some way to be able to have a baseline to improve upon. In particular, if you're seeking the advice of others, because anything that operates in the realm of the subjective is naturally not something somebody else can speak to, right? It'd be like trying to convince you of the best tasting food, right? It's like, or what your favorite. It's like asking me what your favorite movie is. I don't know, man. I'm not you, right? But you ask what's the highest box office budget movie ever. All right, now we have a framework and we have a measurement, and we can therefore then speak to something from a quantifiable or objective standpoint in terms of where improvement can lie, right? And that is very important to factor into your considerations as well, and many people don't. And the problem again, the sort of double jeopardy or double whammy with ignorance is that ignorant people tend to be ignorant of their ignorance, and don't take that as like a shot. The majority of people, in fact, everyone is ignorant on the majority of topics, right? It's not like you're an outlier or you're stupid or anything for not knowing about something. Like you don't know what you don't know, right? So don't take it as like a personal shot if anything that I'm saying conflicts with your previous paradigms or worldviews. It's just obviously if you're watching a video on how to improve your league start, you at least from some like metacognitive level understand that this is a shortcoming, or at least if it's not a shortcoming or something that you're falling behind on, you at least perceive it that way. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching a video on how to improve it. And so once you make that, like, you internalize or you recognize that in yourself, um, what do you have to lose, I guess, right? It's like, not what do you have to lose. It's a bad way to put it. It's, if you're very attached to something because it's all that you know, or it's what you see most people doing, um, and so it's hard for you to detach from the reality or what you perceive to be the reality, or like the universality of that approach, that technique, that strategy, that outlook, whatever it is, right? Again, just apply that lens of logic to it, right? If this same line of thinking and this same line of behavior has led you to the same outcomes over and over and over, and some part of you is yearning for a better outcome to the point that you're seeking advice to improve upon that, then you have to be willing to strip yourself of preconceived notions therein, right? And so once you get past that barrier, because again, the reality is, I've very rarely have I met people in PoE that are dispossessed of like the faculties, intelligence, or capacity in either time and or effect or currency or ability to achieve any of the goals that they alleged to want to where their ambitions lie, right? It's not like there's anything um, in terms of their ability or their capability that prevents them from doing so, outside of their own outlook, right? There are always a million reasons not to do something. So, like, if you find yourself saying why you shouldn't do something or convincing yourself, like, it's the easy way out. Just find a single reason why you want it, right? Specify what that goal is. I said keep it measurable and short, and then set a concrete plan in place to get to that goal, right? And that A will make things easier, but B, once you have success with those things, you can build upon them and build upon them and build upon them. And speaking to, again, like the capabilities of people, like, self doubt has killed far more ambition than failure has, right? Uh, the end state that you are desiring is 9 times out of 10. Uh, the barrier to your success is yourself or your line of thinking, not your ability, your time, not some malicious behind the scenes actor, making things unfair for you. It's just like an unwillingness to either match your behavior with your ambition, right? So like you're setting goals, but you're not being honest with yourself about your willingness to accomplish them, or you're you just convince yourself that oh, it's too risky, or I shouldn't do this, or oh, nobody else is doing the same thing, or you allow the self doubt to cloud your judgment, or you allow previous previous behaviors or previous patterns of behavior to dissuade you from future like changes in those behavior, despite the fact you recognize that those patterns of action have led to outcomes that you perceive to be wanting. Uh, yeah, so with that in mind, speaking about league starts, again, I know I haven't been very specific about things here. Um, when we discussed what was released, right, what they announced, uh, I think what's great about that is that um, you have these specific targeted goals. You have the different crafting mechanics, which again we'll have to see how they're implemented. We'll have to look at the patch notes for me to give you specifics on these things. I mentioned a couple of these really dope ass uniques that are coming out. They've added a new endgame system with pinnacles. They've changed the way that the stuff interacts. They've added new ascendancy classes. All that stuff is fucking fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Not like that stuff is meaningless. But until you have patch notes, it's really hard for me to speak to what I will specifically be doing, which is why I'm trying to take this sort of 30,000 foot view as to how my perceptions of what was announced can be actionably applied to any of the prospective viewers of this video or who are watching now live on Twitch, how you can actually use this information to benefit yourself, right? And again, with respect to those specifics about what I'll be doing, you'll need the patch notes. But taking into the bigger picture approach, transitioning that into how I league start, I just kind of gave you that 30,000 foot view about where mistakes lie on other people's parts, why what you perceive to be popular consensus with streamers or whoever might actually be the very reason why you're struggling. Um, the difference between the objective and the subjective, the quantifiable and the qualitative, um, the mental barriers that might be in your way. We spoke about the additive nature of mapping versus the multiplicative or exponential nature of currency focused things like crafting, trading, um, flipping, arbitrage, investing. We discussed the difference between, when I say like various assets, liquidity just refers to actual raw currency. Assets referring to anything that is effectively a store of value. Um, yeah, so I think we covered all these basic terminologies. Now let's narrow the focus into how do I league start, and this is actually a really short thing for me to explain. All right, how do I league start? I level incredibly slowly. I suck at leveling. I'm probably multiple hours behind the people that finish first. I usually don't read the patch notes, or I mean, making content, I've switched this up, but historically, I wouldn't read patch notes until how the leagues go down for 4 hours, right? Like when the league's about to launch, the game goes down for 4 hours. Well, like like if the league starts at 4 p.m. EST, the whole game will be down from like noon until 4 p.m. Well, the new servers launched or whatever, and then you get in the queue and shit. That's usually that 4 hour window is when I would read the patch notes and look into the league. Prior to that, I didn't give a shit. I don't have like some grand strategy, this, because you don't need one. If you can adapt the line of thinking and understand like the universality almost to what I'm saying, and again, understand like the predictable patterns in consumer behavior, the cyclical nature of like sort of archetypal trends that people go after, in terms of value investing, I suppose, or understanding like the fundamental value of things. Um, and again, I can speak to that in a further video once we actually get patch notes. All of these things can inform just a general approach, I suppose, to a league start instead of a like specific like point A, point B, point two, right? Now, I know that might kind of conflict with what I was saying vis-a-vis specific goal orientation, but it is possible to hold two, I suppose, competing views at the same time, and have them both still be true in certain scenarios. And in this case, it is one of those because in my case, I suppose my league starts don't necessarily have to be that specifically targeted because I've built, like, when people say practice makes perfect, not true, right? If you practice bad behaviors, you know, you're like practicing incorrectly, as it were, then you're not going to improve over time. Like, it's like perfect practice will make a perfect, right? Or like practicing good habits will make you good. Practicing bad habits make you bad, right? And I've spent 13 years and over 30,000 hours, as it were, practicing good habits. And so, while I might not necessarily have concrete steps put into place or like a whole lot of forethought or planning into what my specific actions will be, that's because somewhat subconsciously or unconsciously, I can parse through like vast amount of real-time data, and innately know how to act upon them, right? Like, I could observe like PoE Ninja or like checking in on like the currency exchange to see various like arbitrage opportunities. Understanding like different like quick sales techniques you can do, like involving reforging or salvaging. Like, anyway, there's too many specifics for me to get into, but don't take the fact that I don't have a concrete steps put into place as necessarily a guideline for you to follow in terms of how you can actually apply this to yourselves. The reason why I don't necessarily need a plan at league start is because for so many years I did have a plan, to the point that like I've habituated these actions in a way that doesn't necessarily mandate that anymore. Plus, being somewhat reactive to an evolving economy is always a good thing, right? being malleable is never necessarily bad, because even a perfect plan is subject to change, because not all the factors or the variables in the game are controllable, right? Um, the game in this economy, the economy in this game is not fixed, right? It's contingent on player behavior, patterns, trends, preferences, and stuff, and so because of that, it's not like you go to a vendor and like X item costs Y amount of currency, right? They are in flux, and so even a well thought out plan can be interrupted by um, the machinations of a player base that is not necessarily always acting logically. Although over time, typically, you know, if you operate within the realm of objectivity and quantify your actions in a way where they are justifiable mathematically, that will invariably lead to like certainty over time with respect to outcomes. In the same way that like a casino is not really gambling, because as a matter of mathematical certainty, the house will always win. As a matter of skewed or favorable um, outcomes in terms of the you know, win rates on games. And when you apply the law of large numbers, obviously the outcomes will trend towards their aggregate or their mean. But that's neither here nor there. Let me try to specify a bit more. I level slowly, right? I don't really put a whole lot of forethought into what build I'm playing. I usually decide within an hour of starting the league. Sometimes I actually like have like a panic moment when I start, because I haven't even thought about it, and it's like I might be like number 100 in the queue, and then I get to the character creation screen, and like people on Twitch are like, "Oh, fuck you! I'm 100,000 people ahead of me," and then for like 8 minutes I'll sit there, and people are like, "What are you doing?" And I'll be like, "What do I want to play?" They're like, "Fuck you!" Like, give me your spot in line. I don't really stress it too much. And it's often why, like, I either usually will have like one character in a league or two characters in a league, and if it's two, it's usually because the first one I picked was had so little forethought in it that like I just kind of defaulted to something I've played before, because I haven't investigated the options of the league yet, and then you know, I fall back on my like where my knowledge exists, because I can kind of act without, you know, too much critical thought since it's habituated. I get to like map, you know, finish the campaign and stuff, and then once I get comfortable like financially, then I have the time to take a more withdrawn view of the league at large, and I then pick like a build or a class that I actually want to play, factoring in the material considerations at the time. And again, that's maybe not necessarily something I would advocate for other people to do, but that is typically what I do. Just being forthcoming about it. And yeah, so I level slowly. I don't really put a lot of thought into what I'm playing. I don't really stress it too much. I often will make a lot of currency. Like I think this league I had like 3 divines before I finished Act 2. You know, like 2 hours into the league or whatever. Not because I needed the divines, but because I wanted to prove a point about how easy it was. Because people on Twitch chat were irritating me, and it was like I can tell you specifically this league what I did was if you get items, weapons that have at least 16 quality, and if you can find ones with 2 sockets, right? Nothing else matters except for the 2 sockets, the quality. If you salvage that item, you'll get 4 blacksmith whetstones, and you'll get the artificer's shards, which then turn into artificer's orb. Early on, those, both the whetstones and the artificers are incredibly valuable, right? Because you know, if you're playing with like a fizz weapon, the 20% more increase is massive, right? And they're super scarce because a lot of people, you know, they don't drop that often. And so I remember specifically this past league, whetstones were 2 to 1 exalt, and the artificers were 2 exalts each. And this was on like the first day of the league, again, a couple hours after lunch. Now, you could buy those weapons off the trade site, right, for an alchemy orb. Now, alks were 4 to 1 exalt. So what I would do, and again, this is how I had 3 divs before whatever, I would take like the first exalt I got, right, sold it into 4 alks. Those 4 alks, I then bought 4 weapons that had 2 sockets and 16 or higher quality. Okay. I then turned those into 8 whetstones and let's say an artificer's orb. The 8 whetstones then sold for 4 exalts, and the artificer's orb sold for 2 exalts. So I now have 6 exalts from what I spent 1 exalt on. I then repeat that at scale, so the 1 turned to 6, the 6 turns to 36, because it's a couple hours in the league. There's the divine. Rinse and repeat. 2 divines. 1 more time, 3 divines. Got bored of proving my point. Move. Actually, no, for the third one, what I then did, because I just wanted to illustrate a different way in which this was the case, arbitrage is incredibly easy early on, because people they're satisfying their immediate needs, not even short-term needs, their immediate needs, right? If somebody wants a single exalt to buy like a gold rim, right, and they've got like 5 alks, right? If the buy price for alks is 5 to 1 and the sale price like 4 to 1, right, where they could put 4 alks up for sale to get 1 exalt, versus if they could just go to buy the exalt immediately and get that immediate exalt, it'll cost them 5 alks. 95% of people will do the 5 alks instead of the 4, because it is an immediate desire. They have it available to them, and that's fine. Now, if you have any kind of baseline currency, so in the case there where I said I had 2 divs, once I had like, let's say I had like 10 more exalts, I then put the exalts up, let's say I picked like 3 different currencies. I was like, all right, I'll put 5 exalts up for, I'll buy 5 exalts worth of alks at 5 to 1, okay? So I get 25 alchemies from that, which it just tells you automatically when it's there, right? And then I sell them for 3 to 1. So those 5 then become 8, right? And then you do that with 2 other currency types, and they'll be in flux early on like that, right? You just do it passively, and it's like, because the ratios are always changing, while you're still mapping, like, and again, I'll do it in batches, right? So it's like, I enter Act 3, and I've got, let's say 30 exalts. Okay, I'll put up buy orders with all 30 of those exalts. So instead of them just sitting in my stash, where their relative purchasing power is down, I will make my money work for me by putting up buy orders that are favorable. And as soon as they fill, I'll go to my hideout, take out the net result of all those buy orders, put all of the stuff I bought up for sale, and then rinse and repeat, and then just complete that cycle. And then that way, I'm actually gaining, an ROI as I progress through the other things, rather than allowing my net worth to depreciate. And in so doing, by the time I finish the acts, I typically have several divines, even though I'm a few hours behind everyone else. I would say on average, it takes me between 10 to 12 hours probably to finish the acts. Sometimes, actually, the past couple leagues, I don't even think I've bothered playing on the first day. Not I shouldn't say bothered, but like I didn't make a point of it. I think this league I started like 6 days late. But again, that's nothing that you is actionable on your guys' end. Point being, though, it's not that complicated. As I said, what we just discussed in terms of generating like 5 and again 5 divs, like day 1, you can buy literally like any item you want, really. If you did want to get right into mapping, that's enough to buy every build enabling unique, like very entry level rares, whatever. In my case, though, what I then do, right? So I do finish the acts. You might say, all right, cool. What's the next step? 99.9% of people will then take that currency and invest that currency into gear for their character, so that their character can then go do things to generate more currency. Okay? So they will buy, as I just said, they'll get 5 divs and they'll buy 5 divines worth of gear so they can start mapping. Now, what the problem with that is, as we discussed much earlier, is that the stuff that you're likely buying is probably a rapidly depreciating asset, because like perfect items aren't available early on, and if you're fulfilling a need, that need is short term, and therefore those 5 divs that you spent a day from now, the items that you spent 5 divs on are probably worth like 3 divs. Like 3 days from now, they're probably worth like a div. Like a week from then, they're probably worth less than a div. Right? So the 5 divs that you had, that you were so cleverly arbitraged or just took advantage of simple game mechanics like the salvaging bench to obtain, the net result of which was a net 5 div loss. Now, even if you are effective in the use of that currency and you focus on mapping, the problem is that the gains that you're getting, right, they might be felt, right? So you're mapping, the first hour you do maps, you might make, like, let's say, I'm going to put it in exalt terms, because most people don't think in terms of divines for the first couple of days. let's say the first hour that you do maps, you make 20 exalts. Second hour, right, and with those 20 exalts, you upgrade your little bit gear a little bit, whatever. You move up a couple waystones. Next hour, you make like 30 exalts, 40 exalts, whatever. You get a little bit higher gear, right? A couple more tiers up. And like, let's say 5 hours later, you've gone from making 20 exalts an hour to like 100 exalts an hour, and from tier 1 maps like tier 7 maps, right? In your mind, this is probably progress, and by some measurements, sure it is, right? You've perceptibly increased your per hour earnings by 5x, right? You've gone from tier 1 to tier 7 maps. Great. But because maps with tiers increase in difficulty, right, that mandates typically a reinvestment of your earnings into better gear. And as a result, if you're doing this regularly, we talked about the concept of trickle-down itemization, where people will invest, when they upgrade an item, they sell their previous item. Again, that combined with the purposeful crafting of those items and the general influx of supply from dropped items and the overall gear floor increasing over time. That means it has a lower and lower value. If you're doing that consistently, right, upgrading your item to match the difficulty of the content you're doing, again, you're fulfilling a short-term need, and a short-term need that, while it might, again, and this happens rapidly at league starts, like the equal store of value on most of the things that people invest into while they're progressing through maps, they don't even hold their value for 24 hours. In the majority of cases, they will like completely erode their value. And so the fallacy in that line of thinking, for the majority of people, some people navigate this like appropriately in a way that they, at the very least, don't end up at a net loss. But the majority of people will take all of what they perceive to be their currency per hour, and they will reinvest it into gear that then becomes worthless by the time they hit their next checkpoint, to the point that let's say 12 hours from now, you've gone from tier 1 maps to like tier 10 maps, and your currency per hour in terms of what you're picking up in the maps has gone from 20 exalts to, say, 200 exalts, right? They log out for the night. They're all happy with themselves. They log back in the next day. Like, if they were to stop and, again, be objective about things and look at their net worth, what's the value of their gear, blah, blah, they've probably actually ended up at a lower state than they were when they began. Right? Because, again, the purchasing power of like an exalt consistently goes down. The typical investment into gear that people have on those first few days, the items themselves tend to rapidly depreciate. And the increasing difficulty of mapping content mandates constant improvements in gear, and therefore reinvestment of, alleged earnings. Now, this is not, again, there are caveats to this, and there are people that navigate this smartly, and there are people that either, they'll craft with those currencies, or they will convert, like, the exalts they get into, like, essences, or, like, alchemies, and, like, use those on, like, white items to make items that, like, instead of being, like, 100% fulfilling their short-term need, it's like 80%, slows them down in their maps by like 10%, but they still understand the trade-off there, or like they invest 50% of it into things that like gain value to offset the loss or the degradation of the value of the items they're buying, so that like there's still some parity. There are always caveats to what I'm saying. In general, though, that is the phenomena that occurs for most people, and so. It's really easy to understand why, though, it appears, because, like, your lived experience is telling you that you're making more per hour, when the reality is that your net worth is dropping and your purchasing power is dropping. And this is why there's such a dramatic difference between the outcomes of people like myself who put into practice what I'm saying, and, like, your average layman, to the point that people can't even comprehend, like, the difference in outcomes. Without explaining it away by saying that they're RMTing or somebody must be giving them currency or whatever, right? Because it is unfathomable to see the scalability. Now, if you're curious as to what my approach is, pretty much the second I hit maps, I don't put any investment. I defer my short, the marshmallow test. We talked about the marshmallow experiment. I wait for the second fucking marshmallow. That is the best way I could talk about a league start. In fact, I wait for 5 marshmallows. Because guess what? The only thing in the game that is like PvP oriented, where like you have to factor in other players, is the market economy. Anything that involves mapping or challenges or achievements or whatever is effectively PvE, right? If I want to do Temple, right, there is no difference in Temple if I do it on like day 120 or if I do it on day 10. However, uh, the market, because it is contingent on players, and because the player numbers erode over time, and so you're typically at like peak supply of majority of things except for very high end items at the beginning of the league, and the demand is typically the lowest at the beginning of the league because people are very batched or very uh, centralized in their pursuits at the start of a league. Right, there's a lot of clarity for most people in terms of what their next step is at the beginning, right? And then you tend to have a divergence of effort and of focus once you get like a week into the league, and therefore you start to see some more diversification in terms of where people are allocating their resources. For the first week, it's very homogenized, right? And so if you understand that the first week has this very patterned and cyclical behavioral economics underlying the actions of the players, uh, okay, all right, well let's rather than becoming another lemming falling off the cliff, let's say to ourselves, I'm willing to defer my pursuit of my own character's power for a week, and instead I'm going to focus on maximizing the effective use or growth of my currency, or of my net assets, or of stores of value. So those 5 divs that we talked about when we were talking about this hypothetical character a little while ago, instead of putting that into gear so that we can go progress through maps, we're going to take those 5 divs and we're going to focus into effectively like 3 camps. Arbitrage or immediate return, the short term, which I would define as like 1 to 3 hours, the midterm, 3 to 6 hours, and then maybe 1 day returns, and then long term ones. I misrepresented the amount of total camps that is, but that's kind of the framework I would have. So immediate returns would be things that are very much just ROI percentage based. So arbitrage being like, I'm going to buy this at 5 to 1, sell it at 4 to 1. That means I'm making a 25% margin every time. I take 100 exalts, I get 125 exalts, right? That, compounding 25%, 25% gain, 25% gain, 25% gain, right? So that will provide a lot of the liquid needs that I will need, right? And so, while, let's say I put up like 5 different orders for those, 5 different sale orders, 5 different buy orders, right? While I wait for those to cycle through themselves, because at league start there is like hundreds of thousands of people playing, you can sell currency things instantly. But while we're waiting for all like 10 of those things to process, I'll go buy something that will fall into the next camp, right? Where it's like a 1 to 3 hour window. Okay? That might be a crafting material. That might be like a jewel. That might be a corrupted item. That might be a crafting base. That might be a variety of things. I'm not going to give specifics because it varies league to league, but there are things that I think are going to be focused on within like that. I will be able to sell or that will gain value in a fundamental fashion in the next 1 to 3 hours, right? The next one being like the 4 to 6. This is typically a camp that will be crafts, right? So these will be things that I'll be crafting with the intention of selling them within that window there, right? They'll be a liquid enough to move within 4 to 6 hours. And again, that will be factoring in probability because the weights are known, the material cost in the short term, and then the sale price, the desired outcome, right? Then the next camp really after that will be me buying things that I think have a very like long-term appreciating value curve. And I'm definitely going to avoid the specifics of those because that's actually where I make the majority of the money. But that is basically like the big profit. I will reinvest into that final camp, right? The arbitrage stuff is effectively there, like that, as I said, like 100 exalts at a 25% gain, which compounds each time. The 25 exalts, basically, think of it as like living off the dividends of like a stock, right? Or like reinvesting dividends and living off the, let's say you have $1,000,000, you get 5% per year, whatever, you live up to $50,000 a year, and then you just keep the $1,000,000, you don't touch it, right? That's effectively the $50,000 in that situation would reflect the the arbitrage currency. That arbitrage currency is what I will use to fund it, like the 1 to 3 hour kind of flips or short term things that I think we'll appreciate. And then the combination of the excess of the arbitrage and the proceeds from the 1 to 3 hour camp are what I will use to start beginning crafting things to sell in that 4 to 6 hour window. The proceeds of all of that, every time I hit let's say I get like a divine, and a divine has a very high purchasing power in the first day or two, maybe upwards of day 1, 2, and 3, right? You can get for a divine, you can get items. I think the most I've ever got would probably be like a 500 to 1,000 to 1 return um, on like the average divine spent that I spent on day one. Now, if you were to look at everything that I spent a divine orb on, what the total outcome was of each one of those that divine spent, after all of them had fully materialized, the best result I would have, I'd say a typical one is probably in the 50 to 250x range, right? So if you were to take the total, let's say I made 10 divines that I put into that final camp, right? The average result I would say I would have of what the proceeds were of those 10 divines spent after all said and done, within that single degree of separation, would be between 50x, so 500 divs, to 250, 2,500 divs. Now, if you compare and contrast that with the phenomena I described, where people are reinvesting those 5 divs or 10 divs or whatever into their character power, eventually, yes, obviously they're going to trend towards more and more currency per hour. But because, again, you have this generalized inflation happening in such a high tick, like a money printer go brrr, and the relative purchasing power of currency is so volatile in the first couple of days. Um, you know, uh, the intermediary time where there's really just stagnation happening until people actually get to the point that they're able to run T16s, and that's again, if you take your first if you followed not some advice, but let's say you put yourself in the hypothetical scenario where when you finish the axe you have 5 divs, right? And then you chose to spend those 5 divs on the gear that you will need to start mapping, get your build set up to be functional, whatever, right? Until you get to T16s, if you're to assess your net worth, right, even though you're gaining more per hour, you're reinvesting it into your gear. By the time you if you were to plot your net worth over the time it takes for you to go from the tier 1s to T16s, your actual net worth is probably pretty much plateau. Now, once you get to T16s, even if you're mapping, it'll start to go up, right? That's where you'll actually start to gain things. But that transitional time in between, it'll plateau and stagnate. And the problem is that in the very best case, that represents multiple hours, right? I'm talking the fastest people in the world. That process of T1 to T15s is usually a day or so, but in the very best cases, several hours. And in those several hours, you might see something like an Exalt go from 20 to 1 divines to 100 to 1 divines. And so those you've just traded what was the purchasing power of those Exalts you had has been diminished by 80%, while your net worth has stagnated. Conversely, had you just used those 8 hours to do the things I just mentioned, as I said, what my average proceeds from that would be, you could have, you could be 8 hours behind people on paper, as it were, but the net result of which, when drawn out over whatever defined period of time you've set yourself up for, is going to eventually hit a point where, again, sorry. If you look at me, my character, my wealth, my assets, my whatever, in the first week or 2 weeks of a league, and then compare where somebody like Fubgun, and again, the only reason I keep saying Fubgun is just because it's the most relatable, understandable. He doesn't do something uniquely that makes him worse than anyone, nor do I have a problem with him. It's just I feel like that's the most resonating name to use. If you look in the first week, maybe 2 weeks, it is going to seem like Fubgun is far, far, far ahead of where I am, or even comparable. Okay, well, Belton's focusing on crafting, him and Fubgun maybe making a similar amount, right? And part of that is just the failure of people to understand like actual value propositions of items until they materialize, right? Because they don't understand again like the again, a value investing or uh, how to appropriately um, judge the value of an item outside of just using relative metrics. So like people looking at price as the best indicator of value, or short-term demand as a indicator for long-term demand, right? And conflating all of these things. I'm not going to expand upon that point, um, but it is an important one. Maybe we can talk about that in a different video. But yeah, it might seem like we're at similar places, right? But and so it might seem like the two approaches are of maybe equal merit or similar merit. Part of that again is a perception issue. But what happens though, the second that they hit parity, right? Like let's say the curve for Fubgun or someone who plays the game like that, it's relatively static. Let's say it's like a 45-degree angle, right? In terms of like their overall, overall net worth or net assets, whatever measurement you're using, right? It's going to be like a 45-degree angle because again, their input and their output are directly correlated. The time they spend is directly correlating to the gains that they have, and so that's why it is, they move up in like perfect proportion. Eventually that is going to stagnate because nobody maintains the same pace that they do like 20 hours a day for the first league start, and also because other things get factored in, which I'll expand upon in a second. But again, the curve never looks like this in totality for any player. Even if MFing, it eventually plateaus, no matter what, because there's always a hard cap on your earnings potential. You're limited in your outcomes. We discussed that earlier. Now, if you look at my value curve of someone who plays like I do, using the method I just discussed, the first few days, first few hours, it's gonna fall way behind. Like let's say Fubgun's curve or people like that are there, ours would be like maybe here, right? Still trending upwards. Obviously, the game's progressive, but at a much lower, like it's like a 15-degree curve instead of a 45, right? But like let's say we get to like 6 hours, that 15 degrees goes to like 30 degrees. Okay, 12 hours, that 30 degrees like to 40 degrees. So we're not quite at 45 like Fubgun, but we're close. And it's like day 2, 40 degrees goes to 60 degrees, and it's like eventually those two, the two what do you call them? Lines intersect, and once that point is hit, it is literally impossible, assuming that you maintain the same pattern of behavior, for somebody in the camp of a play style similar to Fubgun's, which again is how most people engage with the game. It is impossible for them to ever even come back or close to that again. Now, one of the reasons why a lot of people don't recognize this in a more like visceral first-hand way is because when that intersection point happens, coincidentally, it happens to be when most of the people who play like that stop playing the league, right? I'm not saying that's intentional on their part, but I think it maybe has some it factors in as to why the general populace doesn't understand this in a more, for first-hand way. But like it eventually gets to a point. I'm not saying this to ratio anything, but there are days where I make more than what Fubgun makes in leagues. I think the most I've ever made in a single day was 37 mirrors in this league, right? Like that's not like if you MF'd for 12 hours a day every day for an entire league, you probably wouldn't make. Well, you probably make in total selling all currencies, but you certainly wouldn't find 37 mirrors. To the point, like in this league, it's in four digits worth of mirrors. And a lot of the time that happens when I'm not playing. Like the gains happen when I go to sleep. I always play 6 days on, 4 days off. The 4 days off are where I make the most money because I'm not spending everything. The 6 days that I am playing, I spend money. The 4 days that I'm off, the stuff that I spent money on sells. I come back, I've got a big pool of currency, reinvest, rinse and repeat. And again, because the economy in the game is based on players' behavior, right? And because the player numbers always drop, and because the game is progressive, right? So you know what people are invariably going to want. You know what the absolute best in slot is, right? Fulfilling a short-term need or a mid-term need is a lot harder to predict than the long-term need, right? because like I can tell you definitively what the best in slot, like the absolute best possible item is, like when it comes to like an absolutely like perfect fizz weapon, right? Even if you factor in sanctification, there is a defined window of what is possible there, right? And so you know exactly what the best possible is, right? On a mirror item, obviously can't be sanctified, right? It's 6 tier 1 fizz fizz fizz, right? Suffixes may vary a bit, but you know the base, it's calculable, right? So that's a lot easier to know than what somebody is going to need in the next 6 hours of their play, right? Plus, that's obviously going to vary player to player. However, the best in slot side of things, that's universal. And that is also where every single player is trending to. And if every single player is trending towards something, what does that mean? That means that the demand for that item is constant and it is ever increasing. Because the game, as I mentioned, is progressive, meaning people are getting better and better and better and better. So while there might not be a massive demand for something perfect on day 1, day 3, day 5, day 7, right? It's like, that's okay. Because the demand for that is only going to go up. There's more demand on day 7 than there is on day 6. Same thing on day 8 versus day 7, right? Because, again, there's a defined window of what's possible with respect to perfection. And so you know that people are trending towards that. Now, when you also compound that with the fact that the material cost for basically everything, because the crafting requires crafting currencies, right? Currency in PoE is not just like, it's not fiat, right? It's not just a store of value. It's not like gold, right? Where it doesn't have a use case. Currency is used to create items to craft with. And as we already discussed, because of the inflationary state of currency overall, meaning that there is always more raw currency being injected into the market than there is being removed from it, and thus, you have a diminished purchasing power for the same currency item over time, right? That means that if you acquire, craft, obtain, trade for, whatever, a very end game focused item early on, not only does that have a perpetually increasing demand, which you can immediately pattern and immediately predict because you know exactly what the hard cap is in terms of perfection, right? So you guarantee your demand and you guarantee your appreciation curve simply if you look at the elasticity of the product. And increasing demand with a stagnant supply, it results in increasing prices. But when you then factor in that the material cost from a cost accounting perspective, because, let's say I craft a perfect item, somebody else could just craft that perfect item too, right? But because of the generalized inflation that happens to currency at large, right, from what we discussed already, the cost accounting will also increase. So if something costs let's say it's a 1 in 1,000 probability to make whatever item we're talking about, okay? And I diversify, because like stores of value are typically exalts, sometimes chaos, divines, and mirrors, sometimes locks. Well, those 5 items are going to be like your transactable currencies with respect to like bartering player to player. Typically people don't like list things in like annuls or like transmutes or whatever, right? It's typically those 5 currencies, the majority of which being exalts, divines, mirrors. And so, yeah, let's say the item that we're trying to craft is 1,000 to 1, right? Probability's sake. And, we have some money early on, like let's say it's day 5 of the league, right? We've already, for the reasons we just talked about, ensured the long-term viability of this item and the long-term demand. Because again, we're going for that end state item. But because early on, people are fulfilling their short-term needs, right? And so crafting currencies that are not one of the ones that I just mentioned are typically secondary thoughts, right? They are most often used to convert themselves into the transactable currencies I just mentioned. So, but those are also the currencies you need to craft items to make like a fundamental use case, or like to enact the fundamental use case of those items, right? And so like the majority of crafting happens with crafting currencies that are not those transactable major 3, but the other ones. So things like omens, things like chaos, or perfect chaos rather, or exceptional currencies, things like various essences, things like abyss currency, right? Like they're still currency items, but they're not the transactable major three. And because most people, especially in that early stage of the league, are fulfilling their short-term needs, right, which are typically gear-oriented, and because gear is almost always transacted in one of those three currencies, we can largely ignore mirrors for the purposes of early league. So it's really just exalts and divines, right? Pretty much everything else has its therefore because they're not being removed. Like obviously the supply is constantly increasing, right? The player numbers are at their absolute highest at the beginning of the league, right? And so the amount of people, because the game's progressive, as they progress through content, more and more currency will be dropping because more and more people are generating currency. However, the demand or the removal of those currency items is not operating in equilibrium in the first few days because almost everyone is converting those currency items into the transactable currencies, right? Which means you have these items operating at like an ever increasing tick rate of supply um, relative to its demand to the point that they are at their relatively cheapest price early on, right? So their price relative to an exalt, their price relative to a divine, their price relative to a mirror. The first like 3 to 5 days, with respect for the crafting currencies I just mentioned, in an absolute sense, but also in a relative sense, is the absolute cheapest time that you can buy them. And for the reasons we mentioned, and it's also because very few people are going to be like, it's day 4 of the league. Why the fuck would I craft with Witlings? I'm not going to spend like 5 divines to reroll one modifier one time when I could spend 5 divines and improve half of the pieces of gear I'm wearing. And that's true. Like that statement is true, right? But again, it is fulfilling a short-term need, not a long-term economic goal. And again, this is why, to bring it back to one of the initial points I made, it's very important to set concrete goals and very important to distinguish between objective and quantitative things and subjective and qualitative things. Because if you want to have fun at your league start and MF and you know engage in the zeitgeist and you know race to the thing and feel like you're doing the same thing as your favorite streamer, I'm nothing I am saying dismisses that reality or invalidates it. However, the second you start trying to use terms like better, best, improvement, whatever, anything where you need to quantify the goal in order to improve upon it, where it is measurable, right? You need to detach, if not wholly detach, at least be willing to push aside or to defer the qualitative things that you normally attach to and focus on the quantitative things that are goal-oriented. And again, the more that you're willing to focus on the quantitative and less on the qualitative, the higher your outcomes will be there. And now, do you do it in perpetuity? Theoretically, you could, and that would be more akin to how somebody like Janubu would have played previously, right? Where it persistently, perpetually, only about maximizing earnings, right? Now, for me, I can't do that in perpetuity. I can focus on it for a window like that because I understand the machinations of the market and the supreme advantage afforded to somebody by doing so in that window where you have the material supply being at its peak supply, its lowest demand, and if you know how to use it appropriately, the proceeds of the items you craft with that being at their lowest demand and therefore the base types, the materials required to craft them being at their low supply, but also knowing that those are pretty much the most consistently appreciating value curves over time, right? You create like an inverted matrix where your gains are parabolic and their gains are either static or depreciating, right? And obviously that's where this massive wealth gap exists. And the difference between somebody like myself and like Janubu is that I can't do that in perpetuity, which is why for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that's pretty much all I focus on, right? I do it for a window. I engage with the marshmallow experiment, but I still want to eat the goddamn marshmallow, right? As much as I hate what Janubu and people like that represented for the game, and I again, will die on the hill that they're RMTing, which is why they motivate themselves to do it. But taking out of consideration their their incentives for playing like that, they effectively play the game like somebody saying, "Oh, wait for another marshmallow. Oh wait, oh wait, oh wait, oh wait." But because I don't have any incentives outside of the game itself and educating on the game itself, for me that threshold between where I care about the quantitative and the qualitative, typically for me is like after 2 weeks, I start to like factor in the qualitative a little bit, and usually around like the 6 week mark, I would say, is where I like fully swing over from quantitative to qualitative. But as a result of focusing like that, right, I've set myself up so well in those first 6 weeks that I can literally do whatever I want for the next like 10 weeks, and I can never ever pretty much never lose money, right? Because I have done things that are so like the ROI on which is so positive, and it scales again because it's exponential or at the very least multiplicative. Um, and again, because you don't have to like actively transact things anymore because of the offline trader, the passive income I will earn from the actions that I do in the first 2 weeks will set me up basically ad infinitum for the rest of the league. And even if the activities that I engage in thereafter, with respect to how I spend the proceeds of the activities in the first 2 weeks, at the very least, I'll end up net neutral on them, right? Like, let's say I want to play a build, I buy something for a mirror, I don't know, I switch builds right after. Like, at the very worst, I'll usually sell the thing I spent a mirror on for a mirror back, right? It's like, that's not generating wealth in the same way that I concern myself with initially, but it's not like I'm losing money on it either, right? However, the early activities, where it's like you have that explicit focus on the parabolic nature of multiplicative or compounding rates of return, um, it sets you up for the rest of the league effectively passively, but it also just develops a pattern of behavior where I find myself, even when I'm playing the game for enjoyment, which is, like I've done, like I bought this like maybe a month ago, and like in the past month I've magic found 7,200 divs, which is not nothing, right? I've got level 100 characters, right? I've got 40 out of 40 in all my leagues. Right? I know it might not seem like that sometimes, but it's because, again, I focus on all that stuff at the end of the leagues, because there's no difference experientially for me or in an objective sense for me to do all of that later on versus early on. Whereas the viability of economic strategies when focused on early, when the player numbers are highest and all the conditions that are favorable I mentioned already exist, versus trying to do that at the end of the league when everything is at its peak, demand, all the currencies are at their lowest supply, when the player number is ever going down, when there is a massive wealth gap that is pre-existing, right? Like trying to enter into an economic mindset in that, in those conditions, it's no wonder why people get discouraged. Like you're not, I don't say you're setting yourself up to failure, but it's just hopefully like the explanation I just gave can illuminate to you guys why that exists in a structural fashion. And it's why I always repeat that, like, there are lucky crafts, but there are no lucky crafters. The reason why the same people are habitually wealthy is not because they're cheating or because the game is unfair. It's because they put into practice the things that I'm discussing here. Maybe not all of them, right? And even as I said for myself, like there are people who do what I do to a much greater degree. Januba being one of them, but there's a lot of other people who do that behind the scenes, right? I mostly do it at this stage for content's sake, right? That's what people come to me for. So, I enjoy crafting for the sake of crafting in of itself, but in terms of the economic output from the crafts themselves, I've never struggled. There's not a single time I can think of ever that I've not been able to afford absolutely everything that I've wanted to do. I have never had my creativity limited by my capability or my capacity to earn, right? Currency represents freedom. That is its utilitarian function to me, right? That is the end state of it, right? It is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. There are some people where currency is the end itself. God bless them. That's their prerogative. For me, I kind of distill things through that lens where currency provides me the freedom to take advantage of the game in the way that it's able to, right? A PoE to me is defined by its infinitude of a possibility, right? You basically have limitless options, but people tend to take this sort of funnel view of the game where they feel limited by their perceptions of other people's choices, what they distill as the meta, or they put horse blinders on, thinking that those are the only options, or they are limited by their the scarcity model that they operate in. Right? I have a finite amount of currency and a finite amount of time, and because they've trained themselves so frequently to look as currency as like this expendable rate, like I, anytime I have 100 divines, let's say, and I spend 100 divines, I like there's not a second in my mental model where that looks like it's a credit to my account or debit to my, you know what I mean? It's not minus 100 divs, right? It's just a transition of I'm moving 100 divs from my checking account to my savings account, as it were, right? I'm not going to the store and spending 100 divs, and like that money's gone forever, right? Like just that thought process, right? The majority of people approach the game like when they buy something, that money's gone, right? And because they like that's how they think of it, like that mental model is the one they operate in. It sort of becomes like self-fulfilling, wherein because they already like view the game that way or view items that way, they end up buying items that like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know. Whereas if you make like act with intentionality to adopt the model wherein you're simply moving, again, this is just an analogy obviously, but moving $100 from your checking to your savings, in terms of like when you spend something, right? So when I like that maybe is like the best way to TLDR my strategy is that I won't spend money on something that like money spent is not money lost. Now that the only exception being in the pursuit of something that has a large variability, like let's say I'm using Witlings and Perfect Chaos to get like a final 6 tier 1 modifier, right? I don't look at the first like 99 failures on the way to hitting it on number 100 in that hypothetical scenario as like currency lost. That is the totality of that currency spent in that bulk session is the value add there. I think a lot of people like break down. One of the things too is like I don't use like a single Witling or like 5 Witlings. So if something is like I know something's like a 1 in 100 for my desired outcome, I will not attempt that outcome until I have like 150 of them. Like I will adjust and account for variability to make sure that I over adjust so that I can like ensure that outcome. Not only from like a motivation standpoint is that beneficial, but it also ensures that again, very rarely do I ever operate where the money spent is money gone. It's just money spent is either money moved or it's money gaining on its own value, gaining money passively. When I say money, I mean divines. I am so parched. How long have I been doing this for right now? 2 hours, 45 minutes. Holy shit. All right, forget. We're not doing what I'm doing for the rest of the league end. There's no way I can cover that and make this a palatable video. I also didn't do a single temple. So much for that plan. But yeah, that is how I approach the start of leagues. With as many examples as I can give in an abstract sense. The thoughts on the league release, again, if you're wanting more like material and like specific examples, of course, just check back with me. Check back on my YouTube when the patch notes come out. I was obviously I didn't touch on all the things that were announced again because I was drawing from memory. I thought it would give a more authentic interpretation of what stuck out to me. Doing so from recall rather than like going down a list of everything they said and like forcing myself to comment on each one. I think that level of targeted specificity is more appropriate to do with the patch notes anyways. So don't take my like initial thoughts on the releases as being exhaustive. The more important thing here probably to distill is hopefully what could be concluded as wisdom, which of course is the application of knowledge and experience over time. I really do. I have a sincere interest in, obviously there's, if you're just to look at incentive structures, the trade-off here is the more, at least in an ideal world, the more valuable and helpful like my content is, the more people would watch it and like it and leave nice comments and upvote and subscribe. And, that incentive structure would, the better content, the more helpful my stuff is, the better the outcomes would be, and we'd operate in this perfect equilibrium. The reality is that's not the case. I'm sure most of you are probably aware of this on an innate level, if not a um, an observed one. But very frequently, the most helpful stuff that I make, and I like again, I have a much better gauge of what is most useful than somebody who is a self-admitted layman on a topic. Now, the perceptions of what's useful is kind of the problem there, right? Because um, people think they know what they need to know. Like, right? They go to a video being like, here's what I want to know. But it's like, if you knew what you needed to know, then you wouldn't have, like, you know what I mean? You wouldn't be seeking it out in the first place. It's like, so I know we're 2 hours and 45 minutes in this, so there's no way that any of these people are watching right now anyways. But just as I guess a trailing sentiment here, it's like everything I went over here with respect to the league starts. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll have to watch my YouTube video back in the future. I can't tell you how valuable what I just talked about is, though. I usually don't go in this depth because, again, the incentive structures there. I've sort of put this off. I talk about it in little points here and there. I rant about it on stream at times. But I just know on the basis of past experience and my analytics, which does quantitate quantify these things, this video is probably not going to do well. In fact, I'm sure a significant portion of the comments on this video are going to be negative and people complaining about its duration or like the fragmented nature of my thoughts or whatever. But I will tell you this as a person who is perhaps one of the, if not the most qualified person on the planet to tell you this. If you consider and put into effect the things that I talked about with respect to league starts in this video, you will never, ever, ever struggle financially in PoE again. Ever. This is perhaps one of the most valuable things that I have ever put into a video format on YouTube. I hope that your outcomes, if you've spent this long watching, match that reality. And I probably will have more thoughts to add to that after maybe I watch this back and see how it came across. But I know, checking in on a couple of points of the things we talked about, how important and how influential and meaningful the like various checkpoints I went off through mentally here are in a contributing factor to the success, right? Like the teach a man to fish versus give a man a fish thing. I know that people like okay, here's what I'm buying, here's what I'm selling, here's the steps to take to do it kind of shit. I get that that's more palatable. It's much easier to understand. There's a lot less. There's an endemic sense of learned helplessness in the PoE community, in particular as it pertains to, economic upward mobility, again, there are inverted and somewhat perverse incentive structures that exist between making meaningful, long-term, helpful content. Like, again, if you have somebody coming to watch you every single day to learn how to improve, that's a customer for life, as it were, from like a YouTube perspective. But focusing on things like if I were to make every video like this one, and people were to put into practice, like take what I'm saying in earnest, be willing to push aside their preconceived notions or their ideas of conflating popularity with validity, and actually sincerely put into practice what I'm saying, again, I'd probably lose that viewer. You wouldn't need me anymore, right? And that's not I've never in my life ever have I avoided making content because I thought that I've ever thought of my viewership as a like an economic unit. And I on my life I swear that I do have a sincere interest in wanting you guys to improve, but also I have to the realities of the marketplace, as it were, in terms of an attention economy and a YouTube audience are what they are. I imagine less than 5% of people will be watching still at this point. And to a greater extent, it's like the fact that people won't watch initially or won't follow through will reduce its reach. It'll get shown to less people. The impressions will go down. There's not a metric that says how meaningful, like an analytic rather, being like, all right, for the people that clicked off immediately, how harmful was it for the time that you spent? Zero harm, right? let's say somebody invests 30 minutes into watching. Did you learn nothing in 30 minutes? Okay, let's say I was I don't know, if you were to put it into a unit, like a quantifiable measurement, let's say the 30 minutes I spent here were like a -1, right? Whereas the people who watched for 180 minutes, let's say they were a plus 100, right? Now there might be only like 1/5 as many people who left after 180 minutes as who left after 30, but the net result could be like dramatically higher, right? Like the actual quality of content, the impact of it. There's nothing that measures that, right? So like the virality and the engagement and impressions and the watch time from your initial audience, right? So like how people interact with something immediately, and as will dictate how many people it is shown to, and like within that first like 1 to 3 day window, if that doesn't have like a attraction, it becomes a negative feedback loop, which obviously from like a creator standpoint disincentivizes you from making that content, because and the thing is too, it could be really like people are a lot more vocal about things that are they perceive to be negative than things that are either like neutral or positive, right? People are a lot more likely to say fuck you than thank you, especially online. Well, maybe exclusively online. But you know, the people that like do sit through it, who gain a lot from it, learn a lot from it, benefit a lot from it. Unfortunately, there's not, very rarely is there like, are those people going to then become advocates for that content, go share it to things, do things that might counteract the negative consequences of making videos that are abstract, maybe more cerebral, or certainly longer. I guess this isn't really pertinent for you guys to understand, but it is. I just wanted to explain why it was that I don't, despite the fact that I just openly acknowledge the fact that this is perhaps one of the most meaningful and actually helpful videos I've made in a long time. The reason why I would have, despite possessing this knowledge for many years now, why I wouldn't have made it in the past, or if I'm suggesting that the other videos I've made previously, were not useful. Not the case. I just wanted to explain to you why it is that taking the time and effort, like again, I'm sure I'm not going to be able to speak. I can hear myself losing my voice already. Parched as fuck. A lot of the time, it just doesn't seem like it's worth it to do these because, not only does like the analytics not support it, right? Like you get like very few subs, you get basically no money. The view count is down. A lot of the times, people leave really negative comments, and so like the people, even the ones that are watching that you think you're trying to help, tell you to go fuck yourself and whatever. And it's like the people that it does land on are such a small percentage, because there's such a small percentage choose to engage with it. And again, even people are so much less likely to, and whatever. It's just, it seems like on all fronts, when you focus on things like that, the feedback is negative, and so it's you want it, like you want to be liked, you want people to enjoy it, you want to do well, and so if I could ask anything, if you sat through all of this, if you did find value, first of all, beyond anything else, please, even if it seems like it's counterintuitive, trust me, if you put into practice the things I talked about, you will do better. In fact, you'll probably not need to watch another one of these league starts again. I will make a follow-up video when the patch notes come out, whatever. But this video is far more important than the specifics, right? The sort of metacognitive or like conceptual framework that you operate within is infinitely more valuable than like the league-to-league differences or the day-to-day specifics. Infinitely more valuable. But if you did sit through all this and you listened through this, closing ramble here, if you could do me a solid, again, if you could just leave maybe a comment, a like, if you're new, if you could leave a sub, and if you really want to go above and beyond, if you could share it to people you think it might help, it would create, it would make a difference. Let's put it that way. Make a big difference to me, at least, because. Maybe to a fault, I do care about what, feeling appreciated and feeling like things are worthwhile, like how things are perceived, as much as I played off does matter to me a lot. but also too when people aren't like vocal about things, like they don't leave comments, whatever. The only thing you have to operate on are the analytics, right? And things like this, the analytics are always dog shit for. So without any kind of communication from the prospective audience, and using that as your only indicator, naturally you move away from things that people perceptibly don't like. I don't even know if people will like this, but I can tell you, whether you like it or not, there's value here. So, anyways, I'll shut up now. This last rant is probably something I should have even included, but do whether or not you choose to, think on it. Think on it. There's 3 weeks till league. You know, I there's no guarantees in life, but I strongly encourage you to put it into practice, if not this league, at some point, and the results will speak for themselves. The actions will be the best advocate for future repetition. I can, I've got 13 years of gameplay that can testify to that, and hundreds, if not thousands, of people who can probably speak to that as well. That being said, guys, thank you for watching. I'm sorry I didn't get to part 3 on this video. I'm also apologize that I didn't do a single temple. We make plans and God laughs, as they say. I didn't even have Twitch chat up during this whole thing. Normally, I blame Twitch chat for me being so animated and incapable of doing things on the screen. I suppose I just need to focus on my words or whatever. I don't know. Whatever it is. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what you thought. And if you're watching this and you have, let's say you were one of those people who used to play in the more typical fashion we discussed at various points, and you did transition, whether from my advice or not, to a play style more oriented around what I was advocating for. Even if that's not novel information to you, if you are hearing this right now, if you could leave, like, not a testimonial to me, but I think that having for not the unconverted, let's say, not that I'm attempting to evangelize, but I think having like other people kind of validate or speak to their experiences, or different, like, I get that it's kind of like it's a lot easier to take like financial advice from your neighbor than it is from like Elon Musk, or like from a billionaire, or from someone that doesn't see, you know what I mean? It's like it's why like it's why like influencer marketing is so successful, right? Because there's like that personal connection, the relatability. And I know that maybe sometimes when I give advice, it seems like it's coming from like such a detached viewpoint or paradigm, or sort of existential reality within the game, that it couldn't possibly apply to you. And so there is certainly value, I think, to other people that may be perceived as more like, not that I'm not your peer or like your cohort or whatever. I play the game the same as anyone else, but hearing it from other players that people perceive to be on their own level, I think will have some value. Not to say that there are levels to this game. The game doesn't have any objective measurements into it. It really is, at the end of the day, qualitative after all, I guess, in that sense. But anyways, I don't know. I really hope this video lands, because it should. All right, thanks, guys. God bless. Hope you guys are as excited for the league as I am. I'm gonna go drink 6 glasses of water, piss, and then read my Twitch chat, which I don't know if they're engaged at all for the past 3 hours, but we'll see. Looking forward to reading some of your guys' comments, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, fellas. Peace.